Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jaden Parkinson. Jaden Parkinson was born on September 26, 1996 in Folkestone, UK, as the youngest of 3 siblings in a troubled family. Her parents' relationship was marked by discord. Jaden's mother, Samantha, recounts that her children were exposed to unsettling experiences. When Jaden was just 7 years old, her parents divorced, and she initially lived with her father. Despite this, she maintained a close bond with her mother, with whom she would talk every night over the phone. As Jaden entered her teenage years, her lifestyle became increasingly turbulent. According to Samantha, Jaden's father gave her excessive freedom, which led to her involvement with a crowd that encouraged smoking and alcohol consumption. Jaden would periodically live with her father and then with her mother. At the age of 13, she ran away from home, seeking refuge with her mother and expressing a desire to live with her. Ultimately, the family court ruled in favor of Jaden's wish, allowing her to stay with her mother. Jaden had a difficult time at school, often clashing with teachers and resenting attempts to control her behavior. In her personal life, she was in a romantic relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at 14. Despite their significant age difference, Ben was 20, Jaden's mother was unable to intervene. Initially, Jaden and Ben's relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually became strained and controlling. Ben exerted significant influence over Jaden's life, dictating her appearance, including what clothes she wore and whether she wore makeup. He also isolated her from her family and friends, causing Jaden to move out of her mother's house and into a hostel for women escaping domestic violence. Ben exerted total control over Jaden's life, despite being banned from her hostel. They frequently argued, and the hostel staff were even warned about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Jaden was trapped, needing his permission to do anything. Ben took away her phone, convincing her that she only needed him and his love. Ben dictated who Jaden could talk to, forbidding her from interacting with men. He monitored her social media, and she eventually stopped attending school. His grip on her life was so tight that he even restricted her from leaving her room to use the toilet. Jaden's daily phone calls with her mother dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Jaden's mother, Samantha, pleaded with her to return home and end the toxic relationship, but Jaden refused. Ben's control over Jaden was both psychological and physical. She was often seen with bruises on her face. On November 30th, 2013, Jaden called her mother to reveal that she was pregnant. Jaden hoped that having a child would change Ben's attitude towards her and his lifestyle for the better. She thought the baby would bring them closer together and that Ben would go back to being the person she fell in love with. However, Ben did not live up to her expectations. Instead, he revealed his true nature once he had complete control over Jaden. He manipulated her into isolating herself from her friends and family, making her financially dependent on him. He even went so far as to restrict her movements, not allowing her to leave her room, even to use the toilet. Meanwhile, Ben was dating other girls behind her back, controlling them psychologically and physically as well. When Jaden's mother, Samantha, found out about her pregnancy, she asked Jaden to come back home, but Jaden refused, not wanting to cause her mother any more trouble. When Jaden told Ben about her pregnancy, he became angry and denied being the father of her child. Before she vanished, Jaden was being threatened by Ben, who claimed he would post intimate photos and videos of her on social media. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Jaden reported Ben to the authorities, fearing he would follow through on his threat. At the time, Ben possessed 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jaden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jaden failed to return to her hostel, prompting staff to launch a search. Given their awareness of Jaden's personal issues, they contacted her mother, Samantha, by phone, but she was unable to provide any information about her daughter's whereabouts. A missing persons report was filed with the police just after midnight on December 4, 2013. After learning about Jayden's tumultuous personal life, investigators reached out to Ben to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, he was hostile and hung up on them multiple times, claiming he couldn't assist and had no idea where Jayden might be. Jayden had a troubled upbringing and frequently clashed with her family, even running away from home on several occasions. Given this history, her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate red flags during the investigation. On December 4th, police arrested Ben Blakely, but it wasn't related to Jayden's disappearance. Instead, Jayden had previously reported Ben to the police, fearing he would post intimate photos of her online. The investigators who spoke with Ben were unaware that he was also a person of interest in Jayden's disappearance case. After being arrested, Ben denied plans to share Jayden's photos online and was released on bail that same day. Samantha, Jayden's mother, took action by distributing flyers with her daughter's picture and using social media to raise awareness about her disappearance, hoping someone had information about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, the police reviewed surveillance footage to track Jayden's last known movements. They obtained CCTV footage from her hostel, which showed her leaving to meet Ben, but not returning. This was on December 3rd. Further investigation revealed that Jayden was next spotted at Oxford railway station, where CCTV footage captured her walking in with Ben. The footage didn't show anything suspicious. By tracing their journey, investigators discovered that Ben and Jayden took a train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. The last known location of Jayden was at the train station in Didcot, where footage showed her and Ben exiting the building. Jayden would typically reach out to her family within a day or two after running away from home to let them know she was safe. However, this time was different. Despite the passing days, Jayden failed to contact her family or friends, and her social media accounts remained inactive. The CCTV footage showing her boarding a train with Ben made him the prime suspect in her disappearance. The police were convinced that Ben knew Jayden's whereabouts and what had happened to her. The footage also revealed Ben returning to the train station alone, but Jayden was never seen alive again. On December 10, 2013, a week after her disappearance, the police arrested Ben Blakely. The investigators wanted to question Ben to determine what had happened to Jayden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At the time, the police considered two possibilities. Jayden might be hiding, or Ben could be holding her against her will. During the interrogation, Ben was very confident in his responses. He claimed to have no knowledge of his ex-girlfriend Jayden's whereabouts, stating that they had broken up and she had moved on to a new relationship. According to Ben, the police should focus their investigation on her new boyfriend. Ben showed a lack of concern for Jayden's safety, saying he didn't care what happened to her now that they were no longer together and he had a new girlfriend. He suggested that the police check her social media accounts to track her location and identify who she was interacting with. Despite Jayden still being missing, Ben was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. The police then interviewed Jayden's friends to see if they had any information about her possible whereabouts. However, their investigations revealed that Jayden had become estranged from her friends after starting her relationship with Ben, and therefore, no one knew of a potential hideout. A crucial break in the search for Jayden came when a taxi driver from Didcot contacted investigators. He reported that on December 4th, around 1 a.m., he picked up a young man on a dirt road who was struggling with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud. The passenger needed help lifting the bag into the taxi, which raised the driver's suspicions about its contents and whether he might have unknowingly witnessed a crime. Further investigation revealed that the passenger had called the taxi using Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When police questioned Ben about this new evidence, he refused to answer any more questions. Analysis of his phone's location records showed that Ben had been to several locations in Didcot, including an abandoned barn in the countryside, which became a key area of interest in the case. The team of investigators, comprising criminologists and dog handlers, visited the location where a taxi had picked up Ben that night to conduct an investigation. It was later discovered that Ben and Jayden had previously been to this area, as Jayden's mother resided in Didcot, which is located near the barn. The police discovered a bracelet similar to Jayden's near the barn. Trained service dogs reacted as if they'd found a body inside, but Jayden's body wasn't there. This led the police to suspect that a suitcase, possibly containing Jayden's body, was involved. The police asked the public to come forward if they'd seen a man carrying a large suitcase in the Didcot area. Meanwhile, they conducted door-to-door interviews with nearby residents. Surveillance footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jayden didn't have a suitcase with them. Investigators were determined to find out where Ben got the suitcase, but they also considered the possibility that the man seen with the suitcase by the taxi driver wasn't actually Ben. On December 14th, the police found a crucial lead in their investigation. Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned barn where the mysterious events unfolded. When the police arrived at their doorstep, Ben's grandmother immediately asked, "Are you here about the suitcase?" The grandmother explained that Ben had borrowed a suitcase from her a few days prior, hurriedly emptying its contents on the floor without explanation. He returned the suitcase 2 days later, but it was dirty. Additionally, she reported that 2 shovels had gone missing and reappeared, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the dirt-covered shovels raised suspicions that Ben may not have acted alone. Moreover, Jake, Ben's 17-year-old brother, was revealed to be a friend of Jayden's, which hinted at a potential connection between them. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding dirt bikes together around the time the police were searching for Jayden. The police arrested Jake Blakely on suspicion of being involved in the crime. They sent the suitcase Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn to a laboratory for analysis to see if it had any traces of Jayden's DNA. Based on the evidence, investigators developed a theory that Jayden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in a suitcase and taken to another location where she was buried. However, searching the vast fields surrounding Didcot made finding her body a daunting task. To aid in the investigation, the police used aerial photography to identify 10 areas where the soil surface had recently been disturbed. They checked several locations, but didn't find Jayden's body until they had searched all 10 areas of interest. A significant development occurred in the case when Jake Blakely began cooperating with the police. He directed them to investigate his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near the All Saints Church. Although the cemetery was one of 10 locations that had recently shown signs of surface disturbance, it was initially considered a low priority since such changes are not unusual in a cemetery setting. However, after receiving a note from Jake Blakely suggesting that Jayden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave, the police cordoned off the cemetery. This was a completely new and unprecedented tactic in hiding a victim's body, and it drew widespread media attention. Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle had been buried in 2006, and the forensic team set up a tent in the cemetery to conduct their investigation. After some time, they made the grim discovery. Jayden's body was found in the grave, naked, with no clothes or jewelry present. This was the first time in the country that a victim's body had been hidden in an existing grave. An examination by forensic experts revealed that Jayden was beaten before her death, with evidence of strangulation and finger marks on her neck. The official cause of death was asphyxia, as determined by the pathologist. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely had a change of heart after speaking with the prison chaplain. He wrote a letter, along with his lawyer, admitting responsibility for Jayden's death. Ben claimed that the crime was not planned, stating that he pushed Jayden during an argument, causing her to fall from a nearby bridge. He attempted to revive her but was unsuccessful. Initially, he buried her body in one location, but later moved it to his uncle's grave in the cemetery. However, the autopsy contradicted his story, showing blunt force injuries to her face and asphyxia as the cause of death, with no signs of a fall from a height. It meant Ben Blakely was dishonest to avoid responsibility for his actions. However, the truth came to light during the trial, which started on June 23, 2014, after Jaden's father had passed away due to heart problems. Blakely showed no remorse for taking the lives of Jaden and her unborn child. Instead, he behaved defiantly, shouting insults and displaying his indifference. Throughout the 4-week trial, it became clear that Blakely was a violent and controlling boyfriend. 3 of his ex-girlfriends testified that he had been abusive to them, taking their phones, hitting them, and choking them if they answered back, or if he suspected them of cheating. Blakely's short temper was on full display during the trial. He frequently outbursted in anger, using foul language in the courtroom and shouting at the prosecutor, Richard Leam. The judge repeatedly warned him about his behavior, but it was too much for Jaden's mother and other family members who were often forced to leave the courtroom in tears. Judge Patrick Eccles was shocked by Ben's behavior, so he sent him to the cells and continued the trial without him for a day. Although Jake Blakely is under 18, Judge Eccles allowed his name to be published because it was in the public's best interest. Jake has admitted to trying to disrupt the legal process, but claimed he thought he was burying weapons or dead animals at the time. Ben promised his sibling Jake an Xbox and £100 to commit the crime. CCTV footage showed Ben and Jaden taking a train to Didcot, then Jake returning alone, hiding his face. The prosecutor said it was a planned crime, with Jake luring Jaden to a secluded spot to kill him. Blakely took Jaden to an abandoned barn in another town after finding out she was pregnant, likely because he wanted to control her and didn't want to become a father. Jaden wanted to start a new life, but Blakely wouldn't let her go. Jaden's mother, Samantha, supported creating a domestic violence registry in an interview with Sky News. She recalled how Blakely manipulated and controlled Jaden, getting money from her, and said she thought she was his target, not Jaden. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before reaching a verdict. Ben Blakely was guilty of intentionally killing Jaden Parkinson. The judge emphasized that Jake Blakely's abusive behavior towards Jaden involved physical and emotional mistreatment during their relationship. Blakely controlled every aspect of Jaden's daily life, taking away her phone to isolate her from others. When she was living at a hostel, he forced her to stay in her room, even restricting her access to the bathroom. The judge pointed out that Jaden was deeply emotionally attached to Blakely, making it challenging for her to break free from the toxic relationship. Finally, in November last year, Jaden found the courage to end the relationship. In response, Blakely threatened to post intimate photos of her online to humiliate her. The court sentenced Jake Blakely to 3 years in prison for attempting to pervert the course of justice in July 2014. His older brother, Ben Blakely, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 20 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda grew up to be an aspiring writer with a passion for words, music, and life. She graduated with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009 and worked at Trinity Mother Frances while attending Tyler Junior College, where she majored in English literature. On September 15, 2010, 15-year-old Nate Anderson found his sister Amanda dead on the floor with multiple bullet holes in her head after returning from a jog. He had gone out to clear his head while doing homework, but became stressed and returned to find the door kicked open. Nate immediately called 911, describing the scene without touching anything. When investigators arrived, Nate recounted the events, still shaken. The investigation revealed that Amanda was shot while sitting on her bed, causing her to fall to the floor. The killer removed shell casings, suggesting a revolver was used. Amanda's death was devastating to her parents, who were deeply religious and couldn't comprehend who would commit such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was trying to find her way in life. She had no enemies and wished no one harm. The investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the crime took place, speaking with residents to gather information about Amanda and her family. Uniformly, the people they interviewed described the Andersons as a tight-knit, religious family. One neighbor offered a possible theory about Amanda's fate. He pointed out that the area was previously crime-free, but 2 weeks before Amanda's death, a house in the neighborhood was robbed. It's possible that the same person was involved in Amanda's murder. The neighbor suggested that the perpetrator might have seen Amanda's brother, Nate, go for a run, then broken into their house. If Amanda witnessed the break-in, the robber might have shot her to silence her. To explore this theory, the investigators needed evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. Typically, burglars who are caught by homeowners will go to great lengths to prevent them from calling the police. However, in this case, nothing was taken from the Anderson home, and Amanda's room was left undisturbed. Amanda's home was burgled, but the thief didn't take anything valuable, including jewelry and a laptop. Amanda's father, Mark, checked the house and confirmed that nothing was missing. This led the investigators to question whether the break-in was actually a robbery gone wrong. The forensic team searched Amanda's room and the entire house for evidence, collecting fingerprints and hair samples that didn't belong to Amanda or her family. They also took the clothes Nate wore when he found Amanda's body, even though they didn't have any visible bloodstains. This was consistent with Nate's 911 call, in which he said he hadn't touched anything. The police still sent the clothes to the lab for further analysis, along with other evidence. To begin their investigation, the police first had to rule out Amanda's family members as potential suspects. They asked her father, Mark Anderson, to show them all the weapons in their house, which was a common practice in Texas. Although the Andersons weren't avid hunters, they did occasionally practice shooting. Following Mark's directions, the police found and seized over 10 different types of pistols, rifles, and revolvers from the house. With no clear motives or suspects, the police explored the possibility of criminal gang involvement, but they quickly dismissed it. Their informants also didn't provide any useful information. 2 days after her death, on September 17, 2010, the police received the autopsy report, which revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times in the head. What was especially puzzling was that every shot would have been fatal. Yet, the perpetrator had continued to pull the trigger 3 more times. The unusual location and direction of the bullet wounds on Amanda's head raised suspicions. The attacker used a small-caliber pistol, firing from a distance of at least a yard away, as there were no gunpowder marks around the wounds. 2 wounds were located on top of her head, one near the right temple and one on her forehead, with all shots entering from top to bottom, except for one shot to the right temple that entered at a right angle. This suggested a deliberate and controlled attack, more like an execution. Forensic analysis led investigators to believe that Amanda knew her killer. They based this conclusion on 2 key facts. Firstly, Amanda was sitting on her bed, occupied with her laptop, when she was shot, indicating that she felt comfortable and safe in the presence of the attacker. Secondly, the fact that the attacker was standing next to her suggests a level of familiarity and intimacy. If Amanda had not known the person, she would likely have reacted or taken action when they entered her room. But she did not, implying that she trusted the perpetrator and did not anticipate the attack. Detectives investigating Amanda's death questioned her college friends, learning she was cautious and avoided strangers, drugs, and criminals. Her best friend confirmed she had no enemies on campus. Despite this, they considered that someone might have secretly targeted her. Reviewing college security footage and reports from the past year, they searched for suspicious incidents, but found nothing useful. The police revisited the Anderson family to inquire about Amanda's personal life, suspecting a personal motive behind the brutal crime due to the multiple wounds. Amanda's mother was baffled by the incident, describing her daughter as a kind and diligent student who regularly attended church. Although Amanda didn't have a boyfriend at the time of her death, her mother revealed that she had met someone about a year prior, but their relationship ended. The police sought out this individual to learn more about his connection with Amanda and the reasons behind their breakup. Upon questioning, the man revealed that he and Amanda shared some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never developed a romantic relationship. They had gone out together a few times, but it didn't progress further. When asked about the last time he saw Amanda, he stated that it was the day before her murder. The police started their investigation again from the beginning, re-examining all the evidence. They focused on Nate's 911 call, which was the starting point of the case. During the call, Nate claimed he didn't enter his sister's room and that someone had shot Amanda. The investigators realized it was impossible for someone standing in the doorway to know Amanda was shot in the head or how many times without entering the room. The police revisited the Anderson house and inspected the door, which Nate said was opened when he got home. Although there were scratches on the door, the lock was intact, leading the police to believe someone was trying to make it look like the door was kicked in. The crime lab analyzed the weapons found in the Anderson house and concluded that one of the pistols was likely the weapon used to shoot Amanda. After a thorough investigation, detectives reached a conclusion. All evidence pointed to a family member as Amanda's killer. The murder weapon, a pistol, was hidden in a secure location, suggesting the killer knew exactly where to find it. Moreover, the killer returned the gun to its hiding place after the crime. On the night of the murder, Amanda's parents had solid alibis. Her father was dining with a friend, and her mother was at work. This left only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother Nate in the house. To find answers, investigators delved deeper into the events of that evening. It turned out that Amanda's father, Mark, had called her to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and claimed someone had shot Amanda. However, this call raised a disturbing question. Why did Nate call his father before calling emergency services, unless he was trying to cover his tracks after murdering his own sister? The police required solid proof before making any accusations, as they didn't want to cause further distress to Amanda and Nate's parents. To gather more information, the investigators decided to question Mark Anderson, Nate's father, without directly accusing his son of involvement. During the conversation, Nate's parents became aware that the police suspected their son. When asked about Nate's recent use of the .22 caliber pistol, Mark revealed that he had given the gun to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, and that Nate had fired it in their backyard. The officers went back to the Anderson house and found .22 caliber casings in the backyard that matched the bullets found in Amanda's body. While this was suspicious, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, 2 weeks later, a crucial clue was found. Nate's clothes, which he wore when he claimed to have found his sister dead, were tested with luminol, revealing traces of blood. Further analysis by a national blood spatter expert suggested that Nate was either in the room when the shooting occurred or was the one who fired the fatal shots. The tests confirmed that his clothes had Amanda's blood on them. Despite this, the Anderson siblings seemed to have a loving relationship. Photos showed them being affectionate, and their parents described them as best friends who often made videos together, including one just days before Amanda's death. The police were left wondering what could have driven Nate to commit such a heinous act. On November 10, 2010, police arrested Nate Anderson at a church, suspecting him of murdering his own sister. The accusation shocked everyone who knew him, as it seemed out of character. The trial began on October 24, 2011, and was an emotionally challenge for the Anderson family. Despite the evidence presented against Nate, his family remains supportive and refuses to believe he is capable of such a crime. According to his grandmother, Dolores Anderson, Nate is a kind and innocent boy who would never harm his sister. His parents, too, are adamant that he is not responsible for Amanda's death. For his mother, Stacy Anderson, the whole ordeal has been a nightmare. She is still adjusting to the loss of her daughter and now has to cope with her son's arrest. Mark expressed his outrage and disbelief at the accusation that his son killed his sister Amanda. The brutality of the crime, including the fact that Amanda was shot 4 times, has led Mark to conclude that Nate could not have committed the crime. Initially, Mark had some doubts about Nate's involvement, but once he learned about the 4 gunshots, he became convinced of his son's innocence. Mark is critical of the authorities, accusing them of ignoring evidence that exonerates Nate and instead focusing on evidence that supports their own case. He feels that they have already made up their minds about Nate's guilt, despite the fact that an expert had recommended that Nate be tried in juvenile court, not adult court. After Amanda's death, investigators found evidence in the Anderson home that shed light on the case. Prosecutors discovered that Nate's computer had a history of visits to adult websites and violent drawings. Furthermore, a text message on Amanda's phone mentioned someone should be shot, but the context indicated it was a joke about Nate not helping with chores and playfully shooting staples at Amanda. An expert testified that this evidence could be a motive for the crime. However, Nate's attorney argued that the evidence was not unusual or incriminating. Ultimately, Nate accepted a plea deal in February 2012 and pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime. He confessed to a psychologist and his parents that he had killed Amanda. In a statement, Nate and Amanda's parents shared Nate's confession. According to Mark Anderson, Nate told him that he shot Amanda with a pistol found in their home and asked for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, the mother, expressed the immense difficulty she experienced as a mother who loves both her children. Nate Anderson has been sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believes that agreeing to the plea deal was in Nate's best interest, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Regarding the motive behind the crime, Nate's attorneys declined to provide details, saying only that they know what happened and are choosing not to discuss it further. However, they did reveal that Nate has shown remorse for his actions, has asked for forgiveness, and has received it. The attorneys described the process of coming to terms with what happened as difficult and emotional. The authorities have determined that the incident was a hate crime, as there was no evidence of any other trauma. According to the Smith County Sheriff's Office, Nate will be eligible to apply for parole in 2 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat, was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Pat. During his high school years, Matthew was an active member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his time in the Navy, he landed a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew struggled to get along with his co-workers. According to his sister, Chrissy Duca, some colleagues were jealous of his uncle's influence and resented the fact that Matthew was being groomed to take over the business. As an outdoorsy person, Matthew enjoyed activities like boating, camping, and hunting in his free time. He also participated in softball and hockey games. In 2003, Matthew met his partner, Holly McFeature, and they started dating soon after. They moved in together in a Cleveland home and began building a life. Friends described Matthew as a happy and settled person who was eager to start a family. Within a year, they welcomed their daughter, Samantha, and 2 years later, their son, Josh. Additionally, Holly's child from a previous relationship also became part of their family. Matthew fell deeply in love with Holly, and his mother, Patricia, said he loved her with all his heart. In a short time, Matthew went from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The early years of their relationship were filled with love, passion, and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had become argumentative and strained. Whenever Matthew and Holly had a fight, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened multiple times, and his friends advised him to end the relationship, suspecting that Holly was selfish and had a bad influence on him. Despite their warnings, Matthew never listened and always went back to Holly. Matthew had a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary, but his friends cautioned him to remove her from the list. Again, Matthew ignored their advice. Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, recalled a tumultuous period in Matthew's life. During this time, Matthew's mood would swing wildly, veering from extreme happiness to anger, crying, and fear. Russell understood that Matthew was struggling with depression. Despite being initially thrilled about the prospect of raising his 3 children, Matthew's outlook was overshadowed by the volatile situation at home. Russell urged Matthew to take precautions and remove guns from the house. Later, in 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew began gambling online and lost a significant amount of money. His family and friends grew concerned about his well-being and noticed his depression. At their suggestion, Matthew sought medical attention and was prescribed antidepressants. However, by the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to decline rapidly, prompting Russell to express grave concern about his physical well-being by Memorial Day weekend. Russell had asked Matthew to help him move a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew, who was once very strong, had since gained weight and was struggling with the task. He was sweating heavily, complaining of back pain, and claimed to have lost his strength. Concerned, Russell advised Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, Matthew phoned Russell to ask for directions to Dr. Mandat's office. During their conversation, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to remember where the doctor's office was. The doctor's appointment revealed that Matthew's primary complaint was back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and manage the associated pain. A few days later, on July 30th, Matthew called his father to share that he had bought a fishing rod for his daughter and invited him and Russell to go fishing together soon. Matthew's father said his son was looking forward to a meeting, but later that evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell Henry, who testified that Matthew was in bad physical shape. He had gained weight, was sweating heavily, and had trouble walking due to extreme back pain. After the party, Holly contacted Matthew's father, telling him she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke to Matthew over the phone and found him confused and upset. An ambulance took Matthew to Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he had metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes too acidic. Dr. Mandat, part of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly denied that Matthew had swallowed anything harmful. Tragically, Matthew died the next day, July 31, 2006, due to kidney failure. Dr. Mandat explained that metabolic acidosis is usually caused by respiratory problems, but not in this case. He added that ethylene glycol, a toxic substance found in antifreeze, can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's family and friends were devastated by his death, but Holly showed no emotional response. In fact, her friend Rebecca Vega was surprised by Holly's lack of emotions when they made funeral arrangements together. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to enter the room where the casket was, and she seemed unbothered. Russell Henry described her as acting like nothing had happened, almost as if she was at a party. What's more, Holly's actions soon after Matthew's death raised suspicions. The day after his death, she used his bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, emptying his bank account. Her mom reported this activity to the police, leading to Holly's arrest and charges of forgery. Holly agreed to repay the money and was placed on probation for a year. Her family claimed she was trying to get money to care for their children, but it's worth noting that Holly was also a beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although it was a small amount of $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Rebecca Vega visited Holly and was concerned to see cleaning solvents lying around the kitchen, given the young age of the children in the home. Holly was questioned about Matthew's death. She mentioned that one of the items found was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, testified that Matthew hadn't had a working boat since 2004 or 2005 when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer, had been friends with Holly since 2002. He would often visit her home, where she would babysit his children, and they would chat over coffee. To avoid interrupting her or any other man, he would call ahead. One day, when he called, Holly told him he didn't need to worry about calling ahead anymore because Matthew had passed away the previous week. Holly discussed Matthew's death in a surprisingly casual tone, mentioning that he had kidney problems and pain from playing hockey. Her casual demeanor came across as insensitive and heartless, Michael recalled. After Matthew's death, Holly removed all of his belongings from the house. She gave his computer to a friend to delete certain content, and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt, leaving his father and brother with no mementos of him. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly began a romantic relationship with Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. Initially, she told Charles that her ex-boyfriend Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story. When the autopsy results were released in January 2007, they revealed that Matthew's body contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, a key ingredient in antifreeze. After learning this, Holly speculated to Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken the substance to end his own life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether his death was intentional or accidental. Holly gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death to different people, claiming she didn't know what antifreeze was and telling one friend that Matthew died in an industrial accident. She also suggested that a colleague might have poisoned him out of envy. However, Matthew's family suspected that the killer might be someone close to home, citing Holly's apparent lack of emotion at the funeral, despite claiming to have cried in the car beforehand. During their investigation, detectives found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's home, which was documented in the police report. Holly later started dating Jameson Kennedy, a man with a criminal history and substance abuse issues, but she kept the details of Matthew's death secret from him. One night in September 2008, Holly became emotional while drinking with Jameson and began talking about Matthew, revealing previously undisclosed information. Holly broke down in tears and expressed her desire to escape her problems and leave Cleveland. She revealed her regret over a past event. When Jameson asked what was bothering her, Holly made a shocking confession. She had spiked Matthew's drinks, which eventually led to his death over time. However, Jameson wasn't convinced of her sincerity. He sought the counsel of his lawyer friend, Santiago Feliciano, and shared Holly's admission with him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then contacted Holly to discuss her confession, unaware to her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reiterate her claim about causing Matthew's death, but instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming him. Holly denied putting anything in Matthew's drink, saying she never mentioned such a thing to Jameson. However, their relationship began to deteriorate as Jameson suspected she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to Holly's house to confront her. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When they arrived, Jameson attacked them and was arrested for assault. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After his arrest, Jameson told the police that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death. This new information led the police to reopen the case, which had stalled since the 2007 autopsy report. The investigation was reinvigorated as more evidence pointed to Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Dr. Galita conducted the autopsy on Matthew Pat's body. 6 months after the autopsy, Dr. Galita issued a report detailing his findings, which was co-signed by then-County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balge. The report concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the manner of death remained unknown. Dr. Galita explained that the ingested ethylene glycol entered Matthew's bloodstream and then his liver, where it was rapidly broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase. This process transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. Notably, Matthew's kidneys contained an extremely large amount of these crystals. Dr. Galita's testimony revealed that Matthew's flank pain, which started on May 20, 2006, was caused by kidney crystals. During the examination, Dr. Galita found not only kidney damage, but also signs of the kidneys trying to heal. Further examination showed that Matthew had crystals in his heart and brain. Dr. Galita also diagnosed severe acute myocarditis, a heart muscle inflammation that takes at least 3 weeks to develop. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew's death was a result of prolonged ethylene glycol intoxication, which led to a series of acute events and sublethal poisonings over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends confirmed that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would bring to work in a thermos or the original container, often a half or whole gallon jug. One friend, Michael, recalled that Holly McPhee would occasionally bring lunch to Matthew, which always included a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. During their investigation, police seized 2 bottles of antifreeze, one Peak brand, one Saturn brand, from Holly's garage in August 2007, after she had moved out. 3 years after the initial autopsy results, the report was revised in 2010. The updated report, signed by Dr. Frank Miller, the county coroner, concluded that Matthew Pat's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and was a homicide. Although the cause of death remained the same, the revised report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, authorities finally decided to take action, charging Holly McPhee in July 2012 with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Pat's life. In 2013, Holly pleaded not guilty and faced trial. The prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence and featured 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, his doctor, and police officers who investigated the case. During the trial, witnesses testified about Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004, eliminating any need for antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her guilt and pressured law enforcement to pursue charges against her. Holly's legal team claimed that she was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew was struggling with depression due to his online gambling losses, work issues, and difficulties communicating with his young child, which led him to intentionally ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense claimed Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze, not multiple doses over time. They presented Dr. Robert Bucks, who testified that Matthew's death was due to acute poisoning, indicating a single ingestion of ethylene glycol consistent with suicide. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's myocarditis diagnosis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He added that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning and flank pain isn't a typical symptom. Dr. Bucks claimed kidney stones aren't related to ethylene glycol poisoning, but the state presented contradictory evidence. Matthew struggled with depression, but was committed to being a good father. Jameson Kennedy testified that Holly confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks, but Holly denied it. Kennedy's credibility was questionable, but Sergeant Quinn confirmed Kennedy's statement was made when Matthew's cause of death was unknown. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on August 28, 2013, sentencing Holly to life in prison with parole possible after 30 years. The case relied on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Charlotte Payne was born on April 19, 1986 in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She grew up as an only child and graduated from New Milford High School in 2004, where she was active in sports, playing field hockey, track, and tennis. After high school, Rebecca pursued a degree in athletic training at Northeastern University in Boston. The 5-year program focused on preventing and treating athletic injuries. During her 4th year, she became a leader on campus, serving on the Dean's Council and as president of the athletic training club. Rebecca was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, making it easy for her to connect with people from all walks of life. She was always willing to lend a helping hand, which earned her many friends. Her life was tragically cut short when she was found dead in May 2008. The news shocked her friends and left them wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. The police investigation revealed that there were no signs of forced entry at her home, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her killer and possibly let them in voluntarily. Rebecca's apartment, situated on the 3rd floor, consisted of 2 bedrooms. One of these rooms was where Rebecca lay face down on the floor, lifeless. The trail of blood leading from the living room to this bedroom suggested that the attack had occurred in the living room. This theory was later confirmed by forensic experts who found casings at the scene and determined that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. The bloodstains in the apartment indicated that Rebecca was initially conscious and managed to crawl to the bedroom, but her strength eventually gave out. The detective's task was to identify the person responsible for such brutality. They quickly ruled out the possibility of a theft gone wrong, as Rebecca's valuables remained untouched. The apartment was in disarray, with scattered belongings. However, the detectives suspected that the perpetrator intentionally created this mess to mislead them. Alternatively, the mess could have been a result of Rebecca's struggle to resist her attacker. During the investigation, officers noticed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Furthermore, signs in the 2nd bedroom indicated that someone else had lived there. After speaking with the apartment manager, they discovered Rebecca didn't live alone, but shared an apartment with a fellow student. This new information led the police to search for the student. The police also questioned everyone living in Parker Hill Apartments, trying to find any leads. The attack on Rebecca was loud and brutal, with 5 gunshot wounds. It was surprising that many residents heard a woman screaming and gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m., but none of them called the police. This lack of action is known as the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome, a psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to help a victim when others are present. During the police investigation, a 1st-floor resident reported seeing a black SUV approach the building on the night of the crime, although he couldn't see the license plates or who got out due to the darkness. The apartment complex had security cameras both inside and outside, which may have captured evidence of the crime. Investigating Rebecca's murder, detectives sought CCTV footage from the building to aid their inquiry. They requested the footage from the building manager, but he revealed that the cameras only operated in real time, and recording required a video cassette and manual activation. Unfortunately, no one had recorded the footage. This discovery led investigators to suspect the building manager, who had found Rebecca's body and had unrestricted access to her apartment as a resident of the building. They thought he might have taken advantage of the lack of surveillance to commit the crime, possibly under the cover of darkness. The police explored all avenues, and their suspicions about the manager intensified after a background check revealed his prior issues with the law related to illegal substances. Furthermore, another detail caught the police's attention. During their investigation, the police noticed dark red stains on the front door of the apartment complex manager's apartment. They collected a sample of the stain and sent it to the lab for analysis. Meanwhile, the manager was taken in for questioning at the police station. The investigators asked him numerous questions, trying to determine if he was hiding any information or if his story would change, but he denied any involvement in Rebecca Payne's death. The manager claimed he had spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife, and she corroborated his alibi when questioned by the police. However, the investigation was put on hold until the lab results came back. Once the report confirmed that the stains on the door were just paint, the manager was released due to lack of evidence. While reviewing video and photo evidence from the crime scene, detectives became interested in a specific card used to pay for public transportation in the Boston area. Since each use of the card was recorded in the system, including the location and time of use, the transit police provided the detectives with CCTV footage related to Rebecca's case. After examining the recordings, detectives discovered that the card had been used by Rebecca. Rebecca was walking home, calm and alone, with no one following her, so the initial footage didn't provide any leads in the case. A few days later, investigators obtained another surveillance video from a camera outside the hospital near the Parker Hill apartments. This recording showed a black SUV driving by at the same time as Rebecca's attack, matching the witness's description. Although the footage was poor quality and the license plate was not visible, they were able to identify the car as a Ford. The detectives then brought Rebecca's roommate in for questioning to determine if she had any connection to the incident. The woman was shocked by Rebecca's murder and cooperated with the investigators. She had a solid alibi, having moved in with her parents to study for an exam, which her parents confirmed. Although she was cleared of suspicion, she provided useful information. She revealed that Rebecca's boyfriend, Matt, had access to their apartment. The investigators wondered if Matt had a motive to kill Rebecca and contacted him. Matt claimed he had left Boston to live with his parents in New York State around the time of the attack. Although Matt seemed depressed by his girlfriend's death, the investigators were convinced it was an act. Matt's parents confirmed his alibi, but a phone record showed Matt had spoken to Rebecca on the phone around midnight, just hours before her death. But the investigation into Rebecca's murder hit a dead end after Matt was cleared due to cell tower evidence, placing him at his parents' house in New York State at the time of the crime. Years went by with no leads, leaving Rebecca's parents without answers about their daughter's tragic death. However, a breakthrough came in 2012 when the Boston police arrested Anthony White on drug trafficking charges. With a long prison sentence looming, White offered a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he would reveal crucial details about the night Rebecca died. The investigators saw this as a potential break in the long-dormant case and agreed to the deal. After discussing it with the prosecutor, White recounted that on May 20, 2008, he received a call from Cornell Smith, a fellow drug dealer and acquaintance. Smith wanted to meet up and arrived at the designated location with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who was driving a black SUV. The three of them drove to the Parker Hill apartments, where Balba parked in a spot with a clear view of the apartments. According to White, when Cornell Smith spotted Rebecca through a third-floor window, he exclaimed, "That's her." They waited for a while, watching until the lights in Rebecca's apartment went out, indicating she had likely fallen asleep. Under the cover of darkness, Smith proceeded to climb from the first-floor balcony to the second, and finally to the third, where he entered through the open balcony door. Rebecca was not asleep, but rather lying on the couch in the living room when she encountered the intruder. She began screaming, and a brief struggle followed. Cornell Smith then fired 5 shots at her before fleeing the apartment through the front door and driving away. Investigators were skeptical of White's account, suspecting that he fabricated the story based on news reports to secure a lighter prison sentence. The officers were baffled by the motive behind the murder. Why would Cornell Smith kill Rebecca, who was unrelated to his world? But White's next statement shocked and disturbed them. According to White, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. On the first floor of the Parker Hill apartments lived 2 sisters who resembled Rebecca. These sisters, who were also illegal drug dealers, were Smith's rivals. In 2012, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year prison sentence for selling drugs, which he had been convicted of 2 years prior. Following White's testimony, Cornell Smith was also charged with Rebecca's murder, but he denied any involvement. Before Cornell Smith's court appearance, prosecutors were dealt a devastating blow. Their key witness, Anthony White, had died in prison. Without White's testimony, the case against Smith was in trouble, as there was no physical evidence linking him to Rebecca Payne's apartment. However, investigators had another lead, Michael Balba, who was in the car with White and Smith on the night of the crime. Detectives located Balba and discovered that he owned a black Ford Expedition SUV, which matched the vehicle caught on surveillance camera and the witness's description. Balba was arrested and taken into custody, but he denied any involvement in the case and requested a lawyer. Despite having no concrete evidence against him, investigators hoped that Balba's connection to the crime could still lead to justice for Rebecca. Investigators examined his court file related to drug trafficking. What they found was astonishing. Smith had written several letters to the judge presiding over his trial, and one of them implicated him in Rebecca's murder. In the letters, Smith portrayed himself as superior to others. Although some of the content was nonsensical, one letter stood out as crucial evidence. In it, Smith wrote about an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, which ultimately led to Rebecca Payne's tragic death at his hands, a fact he boldly admitted to, stating, "I, Cornell Ireland Smith Sr., was responsible." It's unclear why these letters hadn't raised red flags earlier, especially since they were addressed to the judge. The letter proved that Cornell Smith was in Rebecca Payne's apartment at the time of her murder. The trial took place in 2015. Throughout the trial, the district attorney emphasized that Rebecca was an innocent victim with no connection to Smith or his accomplice, Balba. Payne expressed frustration and sadness, saying that seeing Cornell Smith, the person responsible for his daughter Rebecca's death, is a painful reminder of the tragedy and hinders their ability to move forward. Despite Smith's guilty plea and 18 to 20-year prison sentence, Payne emphasizes that nothing can change the fact that Rebecca is gone forever. The judge ordered Smith to face Rebecca's loved ones, acknowledging the immense pain he caused. Her hometown dedicated a tennis court, garden, and scholarship fund in her name to keep her memory alive. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Burbeck. Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at her mother Lindsay's home for a scheduled tea party, but no one answered the door. This was unusual, so Sarah tried to contact her mother several times, but there was no response. She sent 2 text messages, "Where are you?" and a series of question marks, but still received no answer. After waiting outside for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, to report that her mother was missing and not answering her phone. Tim picked up Sarah and Brandon and took them to his house around midnight. Sarah and Tim then returned to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but found no signs of her or any indication of what might have happened. The house was in order, with no note of explanation. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim reported Lindsay missing to the police, telling the dispatcher that his ex-wife was missing and could not be found. The disappearance of Lindsay shook the small suburban community to its core. In response, hundreds of people from the community banded together to search for her. The search party consisted of men and women, grandparents, dog walkers, teenagers with bicycles, and mothers with strollers. Despite most of them not knowing Lindsay personally, they were determined to find her. For 2 consecutive days, people gathered at Coppice, fueled by hope of finding a crucial clue that could solve the mystery of her disappearance. After days of searching, posting appeals on social media and putting up posters, the community's efforts continued unabated. However, as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the search would be a challenging one. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive grew slimmer. The detectives classified Lindsay as high risk, given that she had never gone missing before, and her family described her disappearance as uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search party refused to give up, driven by their determination to find Lindsay. The local community quickly sprang into action, printing and distributing thousands of posters featuring Lindsay's face throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group dedicated to the search also rapidly gained popularity, reaching 10,000 members within hours of the police appeal being posted online. As a result, posters were soon plastered on every available surface, including lampposts, storefronts, and traffic lights, calling for the public's help in finding Lindsay. The police launched a comprehensive investigation into her disappearance from her home, involving specialist officers, dog handlers, firefighters, mountain rescue teams, volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. They scoured the area around Coppice and the surrounding countryside, using drones and helicopters to search popular walking and running routes. 4 days after Lindsay vanished, the police released CCTV footage showing her last known movements. The footage, captured at 4:10 p.m. on Burnley Road, showed her walking towards Coppice, wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As the search entered its 7th day, hopes of finding Lindsay alive were dwindling. Despite the extensive efforts, the police had yet to uncover any leads on her whereabouts. However, they stressed that there was no evidence to suggest she had fallen victim to a crime, leaving open the possibility that she might still be found alive. The search for Lindsay Birbeck continued into the evening, with hundreds of local residents joining the first mass public search of Coppice after a social media appeal. The breakthrough came when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Errington Cemetery. The dog's strange behavior, sniffing and digging, caught its owner's attention. As the owner approached, they were met with a horrific sight, something soft and unidentifiable underfoot, accompanied by a terrible smell and swarms of flies. Peering closer, the owner saw a foot protruding from the ground, surrounded by earth and grass, wrapped in clear plastic bags. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay's disappearance, her body was discovered in the cemetery, buried in a shallow grave. The gruesome discovery marked the end of the search for Lindsay and the beginning of a murder investigation. Dr. Naomi Carter, a pathologist, performed an autopsy on Lindsay's body and concluded that the cause of death was a broken neck, inflicted with extreme force that crushed the larynx. The injury was likely caused by a foot or knee strike. Additionally, there were signs of an attempt to amputate Lindsay's right leg with a saw after her death, resulting in a deep laceration down to the bone. Despite the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter found that Lindsay's injuries were catastrophic. However, she could not rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of Lindsay's disappearance due to the advanced state of decomposition. Before Lindsay's body was discovered, the police and members of the public had searched the area for several days without finding anything. During the search, community volunteers and a police dog handler reported seeing a blue wheelie garbage can abandoned in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet understood. On August 20th, at 9 p.m., volunteers searching the cemetery found a dumpster with a dark stain on the outside, which they suspected might be blood. They took photos and called the police. 2 officers arrived, inspected the dumpster, and found a brown mark that they believed was dirt. Despite this, they decided the dumpster looked new, and there was no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, so they left it in place. Around the same time, other important clues were discovered in the cemetery, but initially overlooked. On August 18th, local resident Christine Alderson found a bloody cloth on the grass while walking her dogs with her daughter. Although she thought the fresh red blood might belong to a homeless man who frequented the area, she still reported it. Another dog walker, Judith Bibby, found red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardinal Hill Trail, which was likely Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a child's voice, but no signs of struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had traces of blood on them, and upon forensic testing, the results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, while Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. Additionally, a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Further analysis of the evidence revealed that Lindsay's body had been wrapped in plastic sheeting, and beneath the sheeting, foliage and grass not native to the cemetery grounds were found. This led investigators to conclude that Lindsay's body had been moved from a different location before being buried in the cemetery. During the investigation, detectives remembered a blue trash can that had caught volunteers' attention. Reviewing CCTV footage, they made a surprising discovery: a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area multiple times. The same camera caught him visiting the cemetery 4 times. A suspect emerged, and footage of him carrying a trash can sparked a stir when broadcast on the news. The public helped identify the 16-year-old, who surrendered to police the same day. Rocky Marciano Price, a local resident, was the boy in the videotape. He lived with his parents and 5 siblings in their family home of 3 decades on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. Rocky had several mental health conditions, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had struggled with since childhood. His low IQ added to his learning and communication challenges. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick a few days a week, where teachers described him as quiet and nonverbal. A 2015 psychologist's report found that Rocky had a limited understanding of his emotions and emotional well-being. He struggled to connect events and emotions. A 2016 report stated that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision and care. His teachers, including Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, tried to engage Rocky in his education, but he preferred hands-on activities to academic subjects. Rocky rarely participated in conversations, even when discussing topics that interested him. Despite this, he was physically strong and tough for his age. He enjoyed activities like going to the gym, tending to the family's chickens, watching movies, and playing Xbox. Rocky seemed to exist in his own world, often unaware of his actions. Rocky Price randomly targeted Lindsay, killing her simply because she was lonely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the first anniversary of the crime, August 12, 2020, Price went on trial and was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Although Price admitted to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, he claimed he had no role in her murder. He stated that a stranger approached him and asked for his help in burying the body in exchange for payment. However, evidence found at his home in Arrington contradicted his claim, including plastic bags identical to those found at Lindsay's grave. Additionally, a tracksuit and other clothing found at his home matched the outfit he wore on surveillance cameras on August 12th, 16th, and 17th, further implicating him in the crime. Defense attorney Mark Van Halls argued that Rocky Price, although responsible for burying the victim's body in the cemetery, was not her killer. Despite substantial evidence, Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving the body. During the trial, Price, through his attorney, provided a statement explaining his movements between the crime scene in Copus and the cemetery where the body was found. However, the prosecutor maintained that Price acted alone. The motive behind the random attack on 47-year-old mother of two, Lindsay, was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release when the parole board deems him no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, stating that Price clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking alone just minutes before Lindsay's incident. Meanwhile, another woman, Zoe Braithwaite, had a narrow escape from a similar attack. She encountered a suspicious teenager wearing a hood and walking alone on a parallel path. Her instincts kicked in, and she became wary of the individual, noticing that he looked out of place for a walk in the woods at that time of year. She quickened her pace and eventually ran away, likely saving her own life. The judge noted that if it hadn't been Zoe, it could have been someone else, and it was unfortunately Lindsay who fell victim. This was a calculated and intentional attack. After attempting to target one woman, he deliberately pursued another lone woman. His actions after the crime reveal his ability to think and plan. His teachers testified that he excelled in practical tasks, which he utilized to conceal the body. Rocky Price made 2 trips to Copus on the evening of August 12th. At 6:55 p.m., he was caught on CCTV cameras carrying a black backpack, possibly containing a saw, to dismember Lindsay's body. Later, at 8:28 p.m., dog walker Anthony Doe witnessed him pulling out an empty trash can from the same location where his grandfather and other family members are buried. Without showing any signs of panic or excitement, Rocky Price executed a premeditated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He placed her in a blue trash can, dragged her to the cemetery, and spent over an hour burying her near the railroad line. He left behind a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The senseless and brutal murder of a stranger in broad daylight is deeply disturbing to society. The random nature of the attack and his prior stalking of another woman demonstrate that he poses a significant threat to the public. Rocky Marciano Price's name and photo were published for the first time after a judge lifted restrictions following his guilty verdict. Previously, his identity was kept secret due to his young age. Although the jury knew details about Price, they were not fully disclosed until after the verdict. Price's mental illness does not excuse his actions, as he knew killing was wrong. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th, where over 200 mourners gathered to pay their respects. As police directed traffic on Manchester Road, Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, was carried into the church. The outpouring of sympathy was evident in the dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers alike left at the scene in her memory. According to her daughter Sarah, Lindsay was a woman full of optimism and positivity, always looking forward to the future. In fact, she had plans to visit Glasgow with her friend Sharon and was hoping to find love on the Match.com dating site. Tragically, her bright future was cut short on a sunny summer day. Rocky Price's fascination with death and mutilation may be a symptom of a deeper issue, such as autism. This neurodevelopmental disorder can cause difficulties with social interaction, motor skills, and repetitive behaviors, leading to withdrawal and isolation. While the exact cause is unclear, the consequences of Rocky's actions fit the severity of his crime, including burying Lindsay's mutilated body. Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Agnes Clavina. According to official figures, more than tens of millions of people go missing year-round the world. About a third them are found alive and unharmed. Nearly half are eventually discovered deceased, due to accidents or murders. Approximately 2 million individuals vanish without a trace each year. These cases often remain unresolved for many years, with the individuals found neither alive nor dead. The story Agnes Kavina garnered attention in the fall of 2014. A young and very attractive woman who was enjoying an evening out at a club with friends seemed to vanish into thin air. Everyone who might have been involved appeared to evade any responsibility. However, in 2023, 9 years after the incident, the case took an unexpected turn. Agnes Kavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Latvia's capital city, Riga. She grew up in a typical family. Agnes was the youngest of 2 daughters. Her sister Greta was only a couple of years older, leading to a close and nearly inseparable bond between them. Their parents endeavored to provide both daughters with quality education and ample opportunities to pursue their dreams. Agnes emerged as a sociable, cheerful, and very active individual from an early age. She excelled academically, engaged in sports activities, and had a wide circle of friends. Her aspirations for the future included careers linked with tourism or entertainment, passions driven by her love for travel, and her knack for organizing perfect leisure time. Furthermore, Agnes possessed striking looks and an impressive physique that garnered considerable male attention and constant compliments from admirers vying for her notice. After high school graduation, Agnes worked temporarily in the service industry while attending language courses and studying to become a tourism manager. At age 20, she decided to leave her homeland and relocate to London, often referred to as the Foggy Albion. She believed relocating would open up more prospects and opportunities to develop her full potential and talents. In London, she sought to build on her ambition, fueled by greater professional opportunities and cultural experiences unavailable in Latvia. Her parents and older sister didn't oppose her decision. They supported her sincerely. Soon after the move, the beautiful blonde met a young man named Michael Mills. He was 8 years older than Agnes, had a good education, and owned a thriving business. Michael had opened a small movie theater and entertainment complex. He was considered very successful. Agnes and Michael quickly found common ground and began dating. Michael courted Agnes beautifully, giving her expensive gifts. They traveled together and made ambitious plans for their future. The couple seemed truly in love and happy. According to those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She appeared radiant beside Michael and dreamed of becoming his lawful wife soon. In 2014, Agnes was offered a 3-month labor contract as an administrator at one of the largest, most popular nightclubs in Marbella, Spain. Naturally, this job implied moving temporarily to another country. However, the ambitious young woman didn't want to miss this opportunity at all. Michael couldn't leave everything behind to go with her because of his job, but he wasn't against her accepting the contract. For Agnes, it was a chance to try herself in a new field of activity, gain invaluable experience, and possibly develop further in this direction. Marbella is renowned as one of the most famous and attractive resorts on the Mediterranean coast. Vacationers from different parts of the world come here, mostly wealthy people, seeking fun and looking to spend money. One frequently encounters show business stars, as well as famous athletes and businessmen. Agnes, who has always been very sociable, enjoyed working in such an environment. Before moving, she visited her family in Latvia to inform them that she had signed a favorable employment contract for 3 months. She and Michael were planning their marriage. Dad, Mom, and her sister were genuinely happy for Agnes and wished her luck. At the end of May 2014, Agnes packed only the essentials for 1 season and went to work in sunny Spain. Her lover stayed in London, but they called each other daily and communicated via video link, sharing everything that was happening in their lives. Agnes actively maintained her profiles on various popular social networks. She posted daily photos, small videos, and stories. She garnered many followers who closely followed her activities and work. It was evident that Agnes was living an engaging and busy life that she enjoyed every day. After the end of her employment contract, she decided to remain in Spain for a couple more months. It was the beginning of the velvet season at the resort, which presented an opportunity to earn good money. She consulted her boyfriend about this decision. He supported her and promised to visit because they had missed each other. Agnes quickly secured a job as a hostess in a high-end restaurant and renewed her lease. Michael visited her in September as planned. They enjoyed their time together, planned their wedding, and chose a honeymoon destination. Less than a week later, Michael returned to London while Agnes continued working in Spain for another month. She planned to visit her relatives before flying back to England to reunite with her lover. Sadly, these plans were not destined to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went with friends to a popular nightclub on the Costa del Sol. A few hours earlier, she had informed her fiancé of her plans. He did not object to Agnes enjoying herself with friends. They had fun, took pictures together, which Agnes posted on her online profile that night. According to those who saw her on that fateful evening, she wore a stunning short dress and carried a tiny white clutch handbag. Toward morning, as the friends were preparing to go home, Agnes mentioned she planned to stay a little longer and then take a cab. She was always quite serious and responsible, and she hadn't had much to drink. So her companions saw no reason for concern at that moment. When the friends said goodbye and headed for the exit, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail and appeared eager to gain her favor. After that night, Agnes was never seen again. It seemed as though she had simply vanished into the crowded nightclub. No one could recall what time or with whom the blonde left the establishment or where she went afterward. The next day, Agnes did not show up at work. When attempts to contact her were made, it became clear that her phone was switched off. Concerned colleagues and friends were the first to raise the alarm, but found that the police were slow to respond to their report of a missing person. Toward evening, a worried Michael called Agnes's mother. He explained that he had been unable to reach his fiancée all day, a situation that had never occurred before. The following day, Agnes's parents and Michael jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report her disappearance. However, they were informed that relatives had to file such a report in person for it to be considered. After hearing this, Michael and Agnes's family took the next flight to Marbella. In the end, the missing persons report was filed by them 5 days after Agnes disappeared without a trace. The first place checked was the apartment Agnes had rented. It appeared as though she had simply stepped out briefly and would return soon. Documents, money, and some expensive pieces of jewelry remained in place. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared food items, and on her bed lay several outfits from which she seemingly chose what she wore on her last night out. It became evident that Agnes hadn't returned home since going out with friends. Her phone was turned off. She left no posts on social media and did not respond to any messages. It wasn't until then that the police started looking into Agnes's disappearance, but unfortunately, precious time had already been lost. Friends and family of Agnes began putting up flyers around the city with her picture, asking for help in locating her. The media picked up the story. Her images featured on television news and made it to the front pages of local newspapers. The leads and clues emerged after police examined footage from CCTV cameras, both inside and outside the entertainment venue. However, there were issues because by then, all files had been erased. Authorities needed specialists and assistants to retrieve them. Their efforts weren't wasted because a camera at the exit to the parking lot showed Agnes around 6 a.m. leaving the club with a man, and it was clear this wasn't of her own accord. This last footage showing Agnes alive was scrutinized in detail. The closer experts looked, the more alarming it appeared. Agnes was being led by a large man, and it was evident she was walking under duress since he held her tightly by the waist. She appeared scared, attempted to break free several times, and spoke emotionally, but the man persistently directed her towards the parking lot, where he practically forced her into his Mercedes A63. When this large man pushed her into the car, another man was already inside while he moved towards the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the car door trying to escape, but at that moment, a doorman nearby intervened as instructed by a gesture from the driver. The doorman pushed her back into the car before receiving an apparent cash reward from the driver for his assistance. Approximately 6 minutes after Agnes entered the vehicle, her phone was switched off and hasn't been turned on since then. Tracking further movement of the vehicle proved impossible due to lack of CCTV coverage along their route. It became obvious that these men were likely among those who last saw Agnes before she went missing. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the outset. Everyone involved in the investigation signed non-disclosure agreements, and information was tightly controlled. Not only was the press kept at bay, but even Agnes's loved ones received almost no updates. For the first few months, her parents and fiancé were left in the dark. They were simply told that an investigation was underway and that it's too early to draw any conclusions. Given that Agnes not communicated in this period, there was little hope she was still alive. Michael periodically gave interviews pleading for assistance to find his fiancée. However, no responses to his appeals were forthcoming. It wasn't until 6 months later that relatives were shown footage from club cameras and provided with the names of the 3 men last seen with Agnes. The large man who forcibly took Agnes out of the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a well-known and influential British millionaire. In the passenger seat sat his longtime associate Craig Porter, who had no particular occupation and frequently appeared on police radar. The third individual was a doorman named Shion Usman. Both Porter and Usman stated under interrogation that they were innocent, asserting that Agnes had entered the car willingly. According to Capper, he and his friend noticed a beautiful blonde woman at the club and approached her to introduce themselves. They claimed she was already fairly drunk, contradicting her friend's statements, but didn't refuse a drink when offered one by Capper. Wesley then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, an invitation Agnes allegedly accepted. However, they asserted that while en route, Agnes changed her mind about attending Wesley's party and asked to be dropped off in the middle of their journey, saying she would take a cab home instead. The man asserted that he had dropped the passenger off at her requested location, an unlit stretch of road. This area notably lacked CCTV cameras. Craig Porter, however, could neither confirm nor deny Wesley Capper's words. According to his confession, he was also very drunk and unaware of when or how Agnes was in their car. He mentioned falling asleep immediately after departing the parking lot. The third suspect, doorman Sean Usman, corroborated that Agnes Kavina appeared intoxicated but could not state whether she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car came to a stop, she opened the door and nearly fell out due to her condition. At the driver's request, Usman closed the door and received a substantial tip for his actions. When questioned about whether the woman's actions suggested an escape attempt, he indicated he did not believe so and attributed it to her intoxication. He added that Agnes neither screamed nor sought help. Footage later surfaced showing Wesley Capper leading Agnes into the car by her waist and wrist with considerable force. His defense was that Agnes felt dizzy and he was simply holding her to prevent a fall. Subsequent investigation uncovered another curious yet disturbing video from Soto Grande in southern Spain at the port of Puerto de la Dua. This footage featured John Capper's luxury yacht being moored there. John Capper is a millionaire and father of one of the suspects. Dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, it shows Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding the yacht carrying a large suitcase, which appeared quite heavy, as well as a rolled-up carpet. Upon their return to Puerto de la Dua a few days later, they had no luggage with them. He claimed that he and his friends had sailed to Ibiza to have fun. The suitcase, he said, contained their belongings, and what the investigation mistook for a carpet was actually bedding. Where it all subsequently went, he could not explain. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and automobile yielded no results, as both had been cleaned and dry cleaned, as how destroying any traces of DNA. However, a long blonde hair was found in the trunk of the car, but it was not possible to establish its origin because this crucial evidence mysteriously evaporated during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution highlighted another curious detail. A few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper called emergency services several times, but each time dropped the call without waiting for an answer. He appeared afraid or uncertain about his actions. The man himself explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The lawyer for the Clavin family stated that Agnes, in his opinion, was long dead and that her body was resting somewhere on the seabed in the very suitcase that the suspects had brought aboard the yacht. In addition, he believed that the case was deliberately delayed and that criminals had plenty of time to get rid of all evidence proving their guilt. Only a year and a half after Agnes's disappearance did Capper, Porter, and Usman find themselves in court. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence, there was nothing more to charge them with. Moreover, even though many believed otherwise, the millionaire and his friend were released on bail and quietly left the courtroom. Naturally, Agnes's relatives were outraged by this decision, but the judge remained adamant. All three men were brought to trial again in 2019, almost 5 years after Agnes's disappearance. They still denied their guilt and insisted that Kavina had gotten into their car of her own free will. The prosecutor asked for Usman to be considered an accomplice to the crime because he helped drive away the victim. Usman could have received a sentence of 5 years in prison. He delivered a passionate speech, stating that he was among the suspects due to the color of his skin and the lack of opportunity to hire a good lawyer. The money he earned? It was sent to a starving family in Africa. Capper's and Porter's lawyers argued that their clients were only guilty of persuading Agnes to get into the car, not of forcing her. In their view, the young woman was dropped off on the road as she had requested. While waiting for a cab to go home, she could have been kidnapped and killed by third parties, given that Agnes was drunk and unable to offer much resistance. The judge's verdict surprised and angered the relatives of the missing young woman because none of the defendants were punished meaningfully. Usman was cleared of all charges. Capper received a sentence of 2 years for taking advantage of Agnes's drunken state to persuade her to get into his car. Porter received 6 months for complicity. In reality, neither man spent a single day in prison as their sentences were suspended. They paid Agnes's family £101,000 in compensation, a sum her family found ridiculous. Discouraged by the decision, Agnes's family appealed. During this time, both defendants managed to break the law once again. Capper, under the influence of alcohol and drugs, knocked down a woman and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also drunk, stole a car after beating its owner severely. Despite these serious crimes, Capper received only probation due to the expertly crafted defense by his lawyers. He paid substantial compensation to the family of the woman who died under his car's wheels and remained at large. Porter was less fortunate this time and ended up going to jail. There's no information available publicly about the sentence received in 2021, almost 7 years after Agnes's disappearance. The prime suspect, Wesley, had been living a rather immoral lifestyle, indulging in alcohol and illicit substances. This severely impacted his health. Just when he thought he had overcome the illness, he suffered a stroke. Wesley died on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. At that time, Agnes's parents filed another appeal with the court. However, since the suspect is deceased, prosecution is no longer feasible. Regardless of what the Supreme Court decides in this challenging case, there was an unexpected twist 9 years later. Although Agnes Kavina was never found, dead or alive, she was presumed dead eventually. Subsequently, her parents, sister, and fiancé concurred with their lawyer's theory that criminals had placed Agnes's body in a suitcase and disposed of it into the sea from a yacht to ensure it wouldn't be discovered. In the summer of 2023, exactly 9 years after Agnes vanished without a trace, the case took another unexpected turn. In mid-June of that year, a gardener working at one of the elite golf clubs in Costa del Sol discovered something unusual near the coast while cleaning up. Upon closer inspection, It turned out to be an old and badly damaged suitcase. Hesitant to open it himself, he called the police. Inside this suitcase were human remains. Examinations revealed that these bones belonged to a young woman whose age at death was approximately between 25 to 35 years old. Moreover, it was determined that this suitcase, with its contents, had been submerged underwater for about 10 years before being washed ashore. After piecing together all available information, police hypothesized that this body could belong to none other than Agnes, who disappeared 9 years ago. To verify this assumption conclusively requires several examinations comparing Agnes's DNA with those remains found in the suitcase. At present moment, experts are meticulously working on establishing these facts. However, details surrounding this investigation have not yet been made public. Should their suspicions be validated, it would provide grounds for reopening the case and pursuing legal action against any surviving suspects involved in her demise. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley was born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, to John and Marion Buckley. As the youngest child and only daughter among 4 siblings, Karen grew up in a loving family. She graduated from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, where her kind and caring nature made her a beloved figure. Her dedication to helping others greatly influenced her career choices. After completing her secondary education, Karen enrolled at the University of Limerick to pursue a degree in nursing. However, her fascination with occupational therapy led her to Glasgow, Scotland, where she began studying for a master's degree at Caledonian University. Karen moved to Glasgow in January 2015 and shared an apartment with 3 fellow students, all new to the city. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates visited a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their home. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At around 1 a.m., Karen excused herself to use the restroom, telling her friends she would return shortly. She took her purse, but left her jacket at the table where the group was sitting. While Karen was away, her friends continued to enjoy themselves. At some point, it dawned on Karen's friends that she had been absent for too long and should have returned by then, but there was no sign of her. They searched the club thoroughly, but Karen was nowhere to be found. They tried to contact her via phone, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Her friends, who had accompanied her to the club, thought she might have gone home, despite finding it strange that she didn't say goodbye and left her jacket behind. However, when they returned home, they realized their assumptions were incorrect. Karen wasn't there either. The only explanation that occurred to them was that she might have met someone at the club and left with him. This thought lingered in their minds as they went to bed. The next day around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she still hadn't returned home. Another attempt to reach her by phone yielded no results. Karen didn't respond to social media messages and didn't log into her accounts. Although Karen's friends had only known her for a few months, they were aware that this behavior was uncharacteristic of her. They didn't try to come up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves. Instead, they went to the police and reported her disappearance, also informing the Buckley family of the situation. The Scottish police promptly launched a search for Karen after her disappearance. Her case was publicized in the press and on television, and her parents made a heartfelt appeal to anyone with information about their daughter's whereabouts to come forward and contact the police. In the meantime, detectives scrutinized footage from cameras at the nightclub where Karen was last seen. The footage revealed that Karen had interacted with an unknown man. Within 36 hours of her disappearance on April 13th, the police identified the mystery man and brought him in for questioning. The young man, 21-year-old Alexander Pacteau, admitted to meeting Karen that night and taking her back to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, approximately 3 kilometers from the club. He also disclosed that they had been sexually intimate. At around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment, despite his offer to let her stay until morning. Alexander told the police that during their intimate encounter, Karen had accidentally hit her head on the corner of the bed, causing an injury and leaving marks on the sheets. The police reacted with mixed emotions to this information. On one hand, Alexander seemed to be trying to be honest, but on the other hand, it appeared as though he was trying to get ahead of the story and explain what the police might find if they searched his apartment. On the same day, April 13th, a man contacted the police to report that he had discovered a woman's purse. After investigating, it turned out that he had found it in the park near Alexander's apartment, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and personal documents, which made Alexander's account of events more believable. It seemed possible that something had happened to Karen after she left his apartment. Meanwhile, the search for Karen remained ongoing and intense. Hundreds of police officers combed through parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings, scouring for any clues that could aid the investigation. At this point, the police suspected only one person, Alexander Pacteau, who had been the last to see Karen. The investigators kept quiet about their prime suspect, keeping his identity under wraps. However, when they searched his apartment and the surrounding area 2 days after Karen's disappearance, the press caught wind of it. Reporters from a local newspaper spoke to other residents of the building, and soon Alexander Pacteau's name was no longer a secret. The police secured a search warrant for Pacteau's apartment, and upon entering, they were struck by the overpowering smell of bleach. They also noticed that the mattress on his bed was the wrong size, and small, dark red spots were found on the bed and in the bathroom, which were sent for analysis. Additionally, the officers discovered a box of tools and a large stash of cleaning supplies in the apartment. A police dog, trained to detect human remains, indicated the presence of a body near Alexander Pacteau's car. While awaiting a search warrant for the vehicle, detectives discovered that Pacteau had taken his car to a detailing salon the previous day, but the service was subpar. During the subsequent search, small dark red spots were found on the inside of the passenger door, which were sent to the laboratory for analysis. As each new piece of evidence emerged, suspicions grew that Karen was no longer alive, but the search for her continued. Journalists managed to uncover the suspect's identity, and the next day, Alexander Pacteau's photograph was featured on the front page of a newspaper. Ironically, this move by the press proved beneficial to the investigation. A man who recognized Pacteau's photo in the newspaper contacted the police and provided crucial information. He revealed that he had worked with Alexander in the past and knew that Pacteau rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow, approximately 9 kilometers from his apartment. Any lead was significant, and the police investigated the obtained information. The farm owner confirmed that he rents a storage space to Pacteau for £10 a week. Inside the space, investigators found a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly reactive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic compounds. They also discovered remnants of a mattress that Pacteau had attempted to burn on a bonfire. On the same day, April 15th, Pacteau was arrested on suspicion of involvement in Karen Buckley's case. Realizing the significant amount of evidence against him, he confessed to taking Karen's life, although he claimed it was in self-defense. A timeline of events was constructed based on evidence gathered by the police and the suspect's testimony, detailing the nights when Pacteau killed Karen and attempted to conceal his actions. On the night of April 11 to 12th, around 1 a.m., Karen left the club, but the reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument and stated that Karen said she would go to the bathroom and return. Even if she had decided to go home, it is unclear why she left her jacket behind. The police reviewed approximately 1,900 hours of surveillance footage and found a recording that showed Karen crossing paths with Pacteau after leaving the club. The two had a brief conversation before walking together in the direction of his parked car. It is believed that Pacto offered to drive Karen to her apartment, but instead, he attacked her once they got into the car. Pacto struck Karen 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death in his car. The dark red stains found in the car, bathroom, and on Pacto's bed were later determined to be dry drops of Karen's blood. After getting rid of the girl, he started planning his next moves. He first disposed of Karen's purse, which was later found and handed over to the police at around 2 a.m. Afterwards, he went back home, and what he did next shocked the detectives. At 8 a.m., he moved the body from the car to his apartment. Using his phone, he started searching online for information about caustic soda. Then he went to a shopping center where he bought 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. Thinking that 6 liters wouldn't be enough, he stopped at another store on his way home and bought more caustic soda. When he got back to his apartment, he put Karen's body in the bathtub, attempting to get rid of it. However, he knew his neighbor, who lived nearby, was supposed to return home around 8 p.m., and he realized he wouldn't have enough time to complete his plan. So, he took the body out of the bathtub, wrapped it in a blanket, and hid it in his bedroom. The day after, on April 13th, he threw a wrench into the River Clyde, where it was later found by divers. Then, he went to a nearby shopping center, about 1.5 miles from his home, and asked a consultant for help. Specifically, he requested a product recommendation for removing bloodstains from a mattress. On the same day, he also purchased 2 padlocks. Next, he took Karen's mattress, bedding, and clothes to a farm, where he burned all of them. On his way back home, he bought a barrel, which he would later use to store the body. At around 2 p.m., he took the barrel to a rented warehouse, poured in the remaining caustic soda, and locked the gate with the 2 padlocks he had purchased. Then, he went back home. At 6 p.m., the police visited him at his home and took him in for questioning. As we know, he eventually confessed to his guilt. However, his motive remained unclear. Pacto claimed that he killed Karen in self-defense during an argument that broke out in the car, but investigators did not believe this story, as it seemed like an attempt to justify his actions. The police assumed that by killing Karen and disposing of her body, Pacto was trying to cover up another crime. However, due to the degree of decomposition, experts could not determine if Karen had been subjected to violence before her death. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was convicted of murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after serving 23 years. Through his lawyer, Pacto expressed remorse to the Buckley family, claiming he was deeply sorry for his actions. Pacto explained to his defense attorney that he was heavily intoxicated on the night of the incident and had no recollection of why he killed Karen. Notably, if Pacto had not entered a guilty plea, he would have been eligible for parole after 25 years, rather than 23.
Have you heard the story about the nuclear power plant employee from Springfield who was having problems with his wife? No, we're not talking about Homer Simpson. We're talking about this guy.
911 emergency, what's emergency?
Help me! My God, my wife's breathing.
Okay, you need an ambulance?
I need everything. I need everything.
Springfield Police.
Yes, help me.
What's the problem?
I just shot this man in my house.
He's inside your house
Killed
right
my
now?
wife. He beat my wife.
Sounds legit, right? Wrong. What you heard just now is the voice of an extremely talented liar. In 1995, Mark Winger, a nuclear power plant technician in Springfield, Illinois, murdered his wife by beating her to death with a hammer. In an even darker twist to the story, he framed someone else for the murder, married their child's nanny shortly afterwards, and got away with murder for nearly 4 years. So how did he do it? Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today I'm going to take you guys through another case with the most insane twists you've ever heard. In June of 1995, it seemed like life couldn't possibly get any better for Mark and Donna Winger. The nuclear technician and his wife had been happily married for several years, and they had just adopted a newborn baby girl named Bailey. Donna was the oldest of 3 sisters in what they described as an incredibly close-knit family. The Dreschers grew to love Mark too. He was smart, Jewish. He was attractive and he was fun, Donna's sister Jenny Levin told the media. Donna just felt like she had found her person. After Mark and Donna Winger were married in 1989, he was offered a job, and the newlyweds settled in Springfield, Illinois. We always joked about the fact when one sister marries, that husband marries 3 sisters, Levin said. We shared our lives with Mark. Donna was working as an operating room technician and Mark was a nuclear engineer. Donna couldn't have been happier. The only thing she would have liked to was to have a child, her stepfather, Ira Drescher, said. Donna's mother, Sarah Jane Drescher, said her daughter was overwhelmed when she learned that she could not get pregnant. But then one day while working at the hospital, a doctor told Donna that a teenager was looking to put her baby up for adoption. Adopting the child was an easy decision for her. She looked at me with tears when she said, "Michelle, I knew it the minute they put the baby into my arms. She has always been mine," Donna's sister Michelle Hansen said. The Wingers welcomed baby Bailey into their home on June 1st, 1995. Donna's family said the couple loved their new roles as parents. They seemed to have all the makings of a long and happy life together. Mark was just as excited to become a dad as Donna was to become a mom, Hansen said. Donna had met the woman who would eventually become her best friend, Deanne Schultz, at the hospital, and with the arrival of Bailey, the two bonded over motherhood. But then everything turned dark. In August 1995, Donna took baby Bailey on a trip to Hollywood, Florida, to visit Donna's family. Her mother had just dropped the 2 of them off at the airport and hired a driver to pick them up in St. Louis, Missouri, and drive them back to Springfield. So after the visit, the 2 flew into St. Louis Airport and hopped in a cab driven by Roger Harrington for the 2-hour ride back to Springfield. During the course of the drive, Harrington reportedly began flirting with Donna and talking about drugs and orgies. Detective Charlie Cox, a police officer who investigated Donna's death, later said, "This gentleman started opening up to Donna about issues he was having. He had a voice in his head named Dom. Dom would tell him to do bad things. Recently, Dom was telling him to hurt people." After Donna safely arrived home with Bailey, she called the transit company to make a formal complaint about Harrington's behavior, and the driver was suspended. Cox later said that the driver started flirting with Donna, telling her he liked older women and even invited her to attend what he described as one of his sex parties. Donna had told her family that the ride was terrifying because he was driving erratically at 75 miles per hour. After the harrowing ride, Donna had been the victim of some strange phone calls, Weinhoft said. The family had believed that the driver had been stalking her and was a danger. Donna called a limousine company to file a complaint and Harrington was suspended. Mark argued his wife to write down the story in case they might need it. Elise later found the note describing Donna's harrowing ride in her handwriting at the crime scene. Donna also told Mark about the experience, and though he played a part of the supportive husband and helped her file the complaint, it turned out that he had ulterior motives for doing so. Just days later, Mark invited Harrington to their home, perhaps under the pretense of helping him get his job back. On the 29th of August 1995, the cab driver wrote Mark's name, address, and the time on a scrap of paper in his car, drove to the Wingers' home, walked inside with a coffee cup and a pack of cigarettes, and was shot twice in the head. Mark Winger then called 911 and told the dispatcher he'd just shot a man who was killing his wife. He informed police that he'd been walking on the treadmill in the basement when he heard a commotion upstairs. He grabbed his gun, went to investigate, and found Harrington swinging a hammer at Donna. In an effort to defend his wife, he'd shot the man twice. Police arrived on the scene to find that both Donna and Harrington still had a weak pulse. Mark was in a back bedroom, rolling back and forth in total shock. When former Springfield Police Detective Charlie Cox arrived at the Wingers' home, he remembered they could see the victims from the front door. Donna was clinging to life, said Sangamon County Assistant State Attorney Steve Weinholt. She had been hit no less than 7 times in the head with a hammer. The second victim, a white man, had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, but still had a pulse when police arrived, said Weinholt. It was quite chaotic, Cox said. I knew that they were probably going to be transporting the victim soon, so I wanted to try and get identification on the male suspect. Cox found the man's wallet and was able to identify him as Roger Harrington. Police recovered a bloody hammer near the two bodies and found Mark's .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, a yellow mug, and a pack of cigarettes on the same dining table. They also noticed that Harrington's car had been parked against traffic, facing the wrong direction. At the crime scene, Cox said Mark was very upset and very emotional, and that he repeatedly asked who the man he'd killed was. Cox avoided identifying Harrington and tried to calm Mark down. As police combed through the scene, Mark asked police if the intruder's name was Roger. Cox confirmed that it was. Mark was shocked and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's the man who's been harassing my wife this week," Cox said. Cox, who was familiar with Harrington after he'd lived in a trailer park owned by Cox, believed Harrington might have snapped. "I knew him as a very volatile type subject. He and his wife rented a trailer for me," Cox said. "Knowing what I knew about Mr. Harrington in the past, how quick he was to anger, I thought that very well he could have gone over there to try to get his job back. There's a hammer laying right there on the table. He picks it up and goes into a rage, then the husband shoots the bad guy." Tragically, both victims succumbed to their injuries. After learning about Donna's previous run-in with Harrington and listening to Mark's version of events, the police closed the case within days, listing Roger Harrington as the culprit. Because once police examined the scene and listened to Mark's story, detectives concluded that he had acted in self-defense. The case was closed in about 48 hours, Weinhoft said. But Harrington's family insisted from the beginning that their son was harmless. "He was no troublemaker. He was a good kid. He wouldn't even strike at anybody," his mother, Helen Harrington, said. "I don't think he would hurt anybody, and I don't think he was crazy." So it seemed like Mark Winger was going to get away with murder. Donna's mother spoke to the media about the evening, and the family received the news of her daughter's murder. "It was 4 a.m, and I said, 'Jenny, it's Mom. Something terrible has happened,' Sarah Jane Drescher said of her call to Levin. "We sat there in my room, just crying at this unimaginable loss," Levin said. In the following months, Donna's mother and sister took turns traveling to Illinois to help take care of Bailey. "I loved Mark because he loved Donna, and that's what was important to me," Sarah Jane Drescher said. "But I had to be very careful because I did not want to ruin my relationship with him, because I did not want to ruin my relationship with the baby. I wanted to be a grandma, and Bailey made me a grandma." Mark was now a single father raising his infant daughter on his own. Donna's family initially flew to Illinois to help out, but they couldn't stay, and they suggested Mark hire a nanny. In January 1996, he met 23-year-old Rebecca Simic, who was searching for a nanny job in the area. Rebecca told reporters, "It just felt like Bailey was the one that really needed me the most. She had been through so much already at the age of 3 months." Rebecca was wonderful with Bailey, and even Donna's family agreed that she was like an angel sent to help Mark. While she felt a little uncomfortable in the house, where 2 people had died violently, she was dedicated to giving Bailey a good childhood despite the trauma of losing her mother. "I didn't want to like Rebecca, but it was hard not to like her," Levin said. "Seeing her with Bailey, there was really nothing bad we could say about her." Meanwhile, Rebecca's role at Mark's home had begun to evolve. When you live with someone and you're taking care of a child together, it's very easy to kind of play house, Rebecca said later on. Rebecca told the media that she was blown away by what the infant had been through in such a short time. "Mark made me feel like I was like an angel sent to him from God or Donna, and it was my purpose to make this family whole again," Rebecca said. She lost 2 mothers by the time she was 3 months old, and she was so smiley, Rebecca said. "I wanted to get in there and say, I'm going to help, and I'm going to make this little girl's life better." Mark helped Rebecca feel at ease in her new role. After a few months, the two found themselves sharing conversation and a glass of wine at the end of a long day. And then one thing led to another as their relationship turned intimate. Within the year, Rebecca was pregnant with Mark's child. The couple eloped in Hawaii in October 1996, just 14 months after Donna's death. "I remember asking him how he could move on so quickly," Rebecca later recalled, "and he explained to me that when you have a good marriage, it's natural for you to just want that again." Rebecca said Mark had told her he wasn't able to have children, so she said she was very surprised when she found out she was pregnant with his child only months after moving in. "Obviously, I wasn't careful. It was just kind of a shock," she said. Mark, on the other hand, was thrilled, Rebecca recalled. "It felt like it was a victory to him," she said. "Mark put pressure on me to marry him and have children with him." Rebecca said that Mark, who was Jewish when they met, even started going to church with her. She said he told her they could raise a family in a Christian home. "I would be honored to be your husband and blessed if you were my wife," Mark wrote in a letter to Rebecca. Mark's rabbi, Michael Datz, asked him about his change in faith, and he said that Mark explained, "Judaism is just too difficult and unforgiving." Rabbi Datz didn't understand, asking, "Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you need forgiveness for?" He said Mark didn't respond. But then it seemed like Mark was trying almost a little too hard to leave the past behind. 16 months after his wife's death, Mark told Sarah Jane Drescher that he was going to sell the house where her daughter Donna had died and buy another one just outside of town. He and Rebecca had started a family of their own, and he started cutting ties with Donna's parents. "I received a letter from Mark one day saying to me I could not be called Grandma," Sarah Jane Drescher said. "I wrote him back and I begged him, please let her call me Grandma. And he said, I'm sorry, there's no way I am going to allow her to call you Grandma, and that's the way it is." Sarah said she mourned that loss for a long time. Bailey Simic, now 25, told reporters that her grandmother and grandfather, Ira Drescher, would send a birthday card to her every year. "I always remember asking my mom, 'Who's Sarah Jane and Ira?' she said. My mom would always explain, like, 'Those are Donna's parents, and they just want to let you know that, like, they love you and that they remember you.'" Eventually, Mark sold the house where Donna had died and moved with his new wife to the suburbs outside of Springfield. Things seemed great on the surface. They had 3 children together, and Rebecca raised Bailey as her daughter. Though chaotic, their life seemed almost perfect. Mark was a loving partner and a very involved father. That would all change quite soon. One day in early 1909, when Mark was feeling ill, Rebecca took him to the emergency room in the hospital where Donna had worked before her death. There they saw Donna's best friend and co-worker, Deanne Schultz. She seemed upset to see Mark, and Rebecca remembered that Deanne had acted strangely when she first came on Bailey's nanny, as if she were anxious to stay involved in Bailey's life. After they returned home, Mark commented that that may not be the last they heard from Deanne. He was right. In February 1999, Deanne dropped a bombshell on the police, revealing that she and Mark had been having an affair before Donna's death. She said that, at one point, he'd remarked to her that things would be easier for them if Donna was dead. She told them that after Donna's fateful ride with Roger Harrington, Mark said that he needed to get that driver to the house. "All you'd need to do is find the body," he told her. Deanne never thought Mark was serious, but when Donna turned up dead soon after, she knew he had done it. Mark had threatened her not to tell anyone about the things he'd said, and she'd attempted suicide several times while struggling with her guilt. After seeing him in the hospital, she decided she couldn't keep quiet any longer. After hearing Deanne's story, police decided to take a closer look at the evidence from the day of the murders. The more they thought about what they'd once assumed was an open and shut case, the more questions they had. Why were there no signs of forced entry into the Winger home that August day? Why would Roger Harrington bring his cup of coffee and cigarettes into the house with him if he'd planned to attack Donna? And why would he use the Winger's hammer as a weapon when he had a tire iron and a knife in his car? At that point, investigators came upon 3 never-before-seen Polaroid photos taken the day of the murders. They'd been with the evidence collected in a civil suit Mark had filed against the transportation company that had employed Harrington. The position of the bodies in the photos showed that Mark's version of events were not possible. Mark Winger had stated that Roger Harrington was kneeling right next to Donna Winger's head, and he was beating her with a hammer, Weinhoft explained. He stated that he shot him and that the man fell backward, so that his feet remained near Donna's head. In reality, the Polaroid photographs show the exact opposite. Blood spatter experts agreed. Cox later told the media, "I was ashamed of the way the investigation went. I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim." It had become clear that Mark was the real murderer behind the scenes the whole time. Rebecca Simic was left to make sense of the tragedy. She had no idea what Mark was capable of, and afterward, she moved her 4 children out of Springfield to feel safer. While Mark had tried to keep Bailey away from Donna's family, Rebecca encouraged them to be reunited. "We'd been hurt a lot by the same person," Rebecca said, "but it didn't break us." Donna's family and Rebecca spoke to reporters about the horrific realization that Mark was a manipulative killer hiding behind the mask of a brilliant engineer and a kind, loving husband and father. In December 1999, more than 4 years after the murders, the Springfield State Journal-Register ran an article based on allegations in the civil lawsuit that Mark had arranged the murder himself and killed both his wife and Harrington. The allegations were based on a blood spatter expert hired by Bark Transportation in the case after the arrest of their employee Harrington. Everything came to a head. It changed everything, Rebecca said of the article. I mean, it went from Mark as the hero who was defending his wife, this noble stand-up guy that every man wanted to pat on the back, to a manipulative, deviant murderer. As the detectives continued their reinvestigation, they learned that Harrington's roommate, Susan Collins, had initially told police that someone asked to meet with Harrington on the day of the murders and that she had seen Harrington on the phone arranging that meeting. Inside Harrington's car, they found a note written on a bank deposit slip with Mark's name, his address, and the time to be there. Roger Harrington was not an intruder, but rather he was lured into that home by Mark Winger, Weinhoft said. Deanne Schultz's cooperation with police and evidence that raised questions about Mark's story prompted the voluntary dismissal of the civil suit against Bark Transportation. I didn't see it coming, Rebecca said. I didn't know that this whole investigation was brewing. I never thought the whole time that they thought my husband was a diabolical murderer. A warrant was issued for Mark's arrest, and he was taken into custody while at work. I had made plans to go to McDonald's Playland, Rebecca recalled. We were there and I got a phone call, and it was Mark's secretary, and she told me that Mark had just been arrested. I was just sick. Like my whole body kind of went numb, and I just couldn't believe it. I was shaking so badly, and I just remembered feeling so scared. I felt that I owed it to him and to my kids to just stand by him, she said. Hanson, Donna's sister, said she didn't feel relieved following Mark's arrest. I still wanted to believe he was innocent, she said. Here's this person that I know in handcuffs, and what's going to happen? Bailey was just 6 years old at the time of Mark's arrest. She said no longer having her father home was scary. I just remember everyone just trying to remain calm and kind of, at the time, being like, Dad's just going away for a while and that he'll be back soon, she said. But that was no longer possible. On August 23, 2001, Mark Winger was indicted for the murders of Donna Winger and Roger Harrington. At the trial in May 2002, a visibly shaky Deanne testified against Mark. The court granted her immunity in exchange for her testimony, though there was no evidence linking her to anything other than keeping Mark's terrible secret. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. One of the key points the prosecution had to prove was that Harrington had gone to the house to meet with the Wingers, not to commit a murder. They presented the cigarettes and coffee mug that he'd brought inside, as well as the weapons he'd left in his car and the note with Mark's name and address. Mark's attorney argued that Harrington was mentally ill, that he behaved erratically, and that these traits indicated he was capable of murder. When prosecutors presented the Polaroid showing the position of the bodies before they were removed from the scene, Mark's attorney argued throughout the trial that first responders could have moved the bodies. It's our belief that Roger comes to the house, he's allowed into the home, now retired Detective Jim Graham said. There were no signs of forced entry, and he was executed at that time. Hearing the gunshot, Donna Winger then comes from the bathroom to investigate. He then beats his wife to death with a hammer. Mark then calls 911. In the 911 call, someone can be heard moaning in the background. When Mark tells the operator he can hear his baby crying and hangs up. He had told the operator there was a bullet in Harrington's head, but when police arrived, Harrington had been shot twice. Deanne also gave damning testimony at the trial, saying that Mark told her it would be easier if Donna just died. I thought it was crazy talk, she said during her cross-examination. After a chance meeting years later, Deanne testified that she confronted Mark in the hopes of gathering information and asked him how he lived with himself, and that he'd replied that he had found Jesus Christ and was forgiven. She said he warned her that if she ever said anything, they would both be in trouble. I didn't think that anybody would believe her, Rebecca said. I just thought if Mark truly did that, she would have come forward right away. Mark's defense argued that Deanne was emotionally unstable and just a woman who had been scorned. Deanne Schultz's testimony was able to demonstrate that in reality, Mark was obviously unhappy, unfaithful, and had specifically talked about wanting to kill his wife, Weinhoft said. Schultz was granted immunity for her testimony, he added. There was no direct evidence that directly linked Deanne to actively participating in this crime. In the end, she was such a valuable witness as it relates to presenting the motive. After a trial that lasted 3 weeks, the jury found Mark Winger guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Rebecca said she believed he would be going home with them. After the verdict, she said the words guilty rang through her head and that she wanted the earth to open up and swallow me. Sarah Jane Drescher and her daughters, Donna's sisters, were with her when they heard the verdict. The 3 of us just embraced and cried, she said. And the story gets even more twisted, because 4 years later, Mark was also sentenced to an additional 35 years in prison when he tried to hire a hitman to kill Deanne, or testifying against him. He even attempted to put out a hit against a childhood friend who had refused to pay his bail. Helen Harrington was relieved and grateful that her son had been vindicated of Donna's murder. We knew that Roger was innocent, and it finally got proven, she said. He was branded a murderer at the time, but then all this came to an end. The police also had to come to terms with the faulty initial investigation. I was ashamed of the way the investigation went, Cox said. I hurt Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim. The police department had too hastily closed the case and turned a blind eye to some red flags, and to right such a wrong, it felt great, Bram added. But Rebecca said there wasn't any closure for her or her family. When we lose someone, you know, we gather. We have a funeral, Rebecca shared. But when someone goes to prison, well, what do? You're just kind of left with this emptiness and this hole that you can't really have closure with that. It wasn't just him being sentenced to life, she said. We were sentenced to a life of a father in prison. Bailey Simic says she missed having her father around while growing up. It was really hard being in school, seeing all the other kids had their dads and that relationship, she said. And now suddenly, I couldn't just go to my dad's room or have him pick us up from school or anything like that. Ben Simic was only a year old when his dad went to prison. I can look at the pictures and look at myself and say, that kid has no idea. He was way too young to know anything that was going on, he said. Rebecca had to move out of Springfield with her kids, and the home that she'd bought with Mark was foreclosed. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, so she had no option but to file for bankruptcy. I didn't have anything to give my kids. Everything had been taken away. All I had was love, she said. Rebecca never remarried as far as we know. She raised all 4 of the children on her own. And Bailey has since reunited with Donna's family. It was so incredible to see that there's this whole big family that loves me, and Sarah Jane still has my baby picture on her kitchen counter with all of her other grandkids, even though we've been gone for so long, she said. We've been hurt a lot by the same person, but it didn't break us, Rebecca said. Although Sarah Jane Drescher says there will never be closure for the murder of her daughter, the family has worked together to set up Donna's Fund, which is a part of Women in Distress, an organization that works to provide shelter for women trying to escape abuse. I think her legacy will live on through people that we help, Levin said, and through the beautiful memories that we have of her. So what do you think of this crazy, twisted case of murder uncovered? Would Mark Winger still be walking scot-free today if his former lover, Deanne Schultz, hadn't developed a guilty conscience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe for more in-depth coverage of some of the most manipulative murders of all time. Stay safe, friends. Until next time. Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alicia Ross. Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980, in Markham, Ontario, Canada, to biological parents who relinquished their rights to the child. She was adopted by Marvin and Sharon Ross, who provided her with love and care. Despite her adoptive parents' divorce, they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to support Alicia. Alicia excelled in school, particularly in drawing and photography. She had a passion for traveling and exploring new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia before returning home and enrolling in university. In the summer of 2005, Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains where she met her boyfriend, Sean Hine. On August 16th, Alicia went for a walk in the park with her adoptive mother and their dogs. She seemed happy
and shared that she was expecting a promotion at work to the position of senior sales manager. Alicia was proud of her achievement and expressed her desire to introduce Sean to her adoptive parents. That evening, Alicia and Sean went on a date, and after returning home, they had a great time together. Around midnight, Sean left Alicia's house, promising to call her as soon as he got home. When he called around midnight, Alicia didn't pick up the phone. Sean wasn't overly concerned, thinking she had simply fallen asleep. Sean tried to call Alicia again the next morning, but when she didn't answer, he began to worry. Unbeknownst to him, Alicia had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mysterious disappearance that would puzzle investigators and her family for years to come. When Alicia didn't pick up, Sean became genuinely worried and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office as Ross. From him, Sean learned that Alicia hadn't come to work, and he immediately rushed to her house on the morning of August 17th. Sharon and Julius, Alicia's parents, were planning to play golf with friends and left the house around 10 a.m. They noticed Alicia's car in the driveway, but thought little of it, assuming a colleague had picked her up. About half an hour later, Sean arrived at the Ross residence and found no sign of Alicia. He called the police to report her missing and also contacted Sharon, informing her of the situation. The police were already present when Sharon and Julius arrived home, alarmed by the news. Sean was the first person to notice Alicia's disappearance and inform the authorities. Moreover, he was the last person to see her alive and well the evening before she vanished. According to him, they had said goodbye at the gate where his car was parked around midnight, and she hadn't been in touch since then. When Sharon approached Alicia's room, she immediately noticed that all her daughter's personal belongings, without which she never left the house, were in their places. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, bank cards, and cash were all left in the room, indicating she wouldn't have gone anywhere, let alone left without them. The gate was open, but not forced, suggesting that the missing person either let her abductor in herself or willingly left with someone. In the backyard, the police found some disorder. The lawn and flowers were trampled as if someone had fallen there. A pair of cigarettes and the right sandal of the girl, which she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground, laid out in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, so the cigarettes didn't belong to them, and Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand. Sean was almost immediately considered the prime suspect. Firstly, he was noticeably nervous, and his account seemed somewhat confused and disjointed. Secondly, he was the first to report Alicia's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they too had not seen her. Additionally, law enforcement found biological traces on the girl's bed belonging to both her and Sean. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia might have denied Sean intimacy, and he decided to force her, then trying to cover his tracks and stage her disappearance, which he likely caused by ending her life. When Sean was brought to the station, questioned, and the investigator's theory presented to him, he was stunned. He was dismayed to be the prime suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend, as he loved her. He also admitted that they did indeed have intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. The missing girl's parents also had nothing bad to say about Sean. He hadn't argued with their daughter, hadn't mistreated her, and she spoke only well of him. Their relationship was progressing rapidly and quite happily, so much so that Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. The police were baffled by the disappearance of a young woman, Alicia, who had no reason to leave her life behind. She was awaiting a promotion at her job and was a responsible person, so it was unlikely she would just vanish without a word. If something unexpected had happened, she would have contacted her parents. Yet, she had left without her documents, money, and phone. The police questioned her boyfriend Sean, but lacked enough evidence to detain him. They didn't rule him out as a suspect, though, and kept an eye on him. Sean seemed depressed and upset, and the massive search effort began the day after Alicia's disappearance. The police thoroughly inspected her home and yard, questioned neighbors, and examined the surrounding area. However, no one reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious that night. The police theorized that Alicia vanished between midnight and sunrise, a time when the streets are usually quiet. Flyers with Alicia's photo were distributed throughout the city, and her story was featured in the news, generating significant public interest. The police received dozens of calls daily, but most information turned out to be false or mistaken. Sean participated in the search efforts, despite being the prime suspect, and even gave a media interview, pleading for help and displaying photos of the happy couple. The search for Alicia expanded to include abandoned buildings, wooded areas, and wastelands. Her parents, believing she was alive and being held against her will, appealed to the public for help. The police suspected someone close to Alicia might be involved, possibly killing her, due to the lack of signs of struggle or forced entry. Despite their efforts, no concrete leads were found, and the case remained a mystery. 2 weeks after Alicia's disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge of driving under the influence and resisting arrest. This led to speculation that he was drowning his guilt in alcohol. Alicia's parents gave another interview, revealing they had only known Sean through their daughter's accounts and didn't know him personally. They considered the possibility that Alicia might have hidden certain details about her relationship with Sean to avoid upsetting them. The police interviewed Sean's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual, but no significant information emerged. The case seemed to have hit a dead end, with the only option left being to keep pressuring Sean to confess. However, a month after Alicia's disappearance, a surprising twist occurred. Daniel Sylvester, a 31-year-old man who lived nearby, called the police and confessed to killing Alicia, revealing where he had hidden her body. Daniel was a reclusive, unemployed man who lived with his mother in a house adjacent to the Ross family home. Despite living near each other, Daniel and Alicia had never interacted before, but Alicia had seen him a few times and considered him mentally unwell due to his odd behavior. Daniel had severe socialization issues from an early age and harbored deep resentment towards women. He was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder at the age of 8 and had been receiving continuous psychological care, although therapy didn't help much. In his teenage years, he confessed to having dark fantasies of attacking and overpowering a girl, which excited him. Despite these fantasies, specialists were confident that they would remain just in his imagination. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions and decided not to continue his education. He became a recluse, living in his mother's house, almost completely isolating himself from the outside world. He spent his days sitting in his room, often visiting adult websites, and occasionally ventured out in the evenings to secretly watch his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He especially enjoyed watching when someone was engaged in intimate activities, which excited him. However, Daniel remained a virgin well into his 30s, satisfying himself with solitary activities. The neighbors hardly ever saw him and considered him a harmless guy. However, the mutilated body of Alicia was later found at the location Daniel had indicated, leaving many questions about why the police had overlooked him during their initial investigation. The condition of the remains indicated that the girl had been dealt with extreme cruelty, with injuries that suggested she had been hit by a car. The exact cause of death could not be determined, but at least 3 injuries were incompatible with life. Daniel initially claimed that he had an argument with his neighbor on a bush-covered path between their homes, during which she called him a loser, angering him, and he struck her on the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. However, something in his story did not add up, and there were missing details and specifics. Law enforcement had to clarify the circumstances and chronology of events to learn how exactly the girl received such injuries. Daniel spied on his neighbor Alicia and her boyfriend on the fateful evening. He watched them from a window as they were intimate, then moved back to the bushes, but didn't leave. When Alicia's boyfriend left, she saw Daniel spying on her and became angry, yelling at him and calling him a pervert. She then turned to go back into the house, but Daniel snapped, leading to a brutal beating and murder. The word pervert triggered Daniel's rage, reminiscent of childhood taunts from girls. He punched Alicia powerfully on the head, knocking her to the ground, then choked and kicked her, inflicting 33 fractures and extensive internal bleeding. After realizing Alicia was dead, Daniel moved her body to his garage, stripped her naked, and masturbated to relieve tension. He then put the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and disposed of it in a secluded area outside the city. Upon returning home, he showered, changed clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. Daniel confessed to the crime but claimed it was unintentional, citing his mental illness and anger issues. However, the prosecution argued that despite his mental health issues, Daniel was fully aware of the consequences of his actions and acted with merciless intent. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed Daniel's responsibility for his actions. Daniel was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Andrew family. In the fall of 2001, another gruesome event shook Oklahoma City. This city, situated in the heart of what's known as the Bible Belt, a region famed for its religious and conservative values. Despite these values, this part of America grapples with high rates of crime, divorce, and teenage pregnancy. The heinous crime within Andrew's family both saddened and outraged the community of faith, adding to this unfortunate catalog. On one rainy October morning, an unusual phone call rang in Robert Andrews' office, who was then the senior vice president of a renowned advertising company. The caller claimed to be a doctor at a local hospital and informed him that his wife, Brenda Andrew, was in critical condition. In a panic, Robert rushed to his car and sped towards the clinic. While driving, he noticed something alarming. When pressing the brake pedal, his vehicle would not stop. After running through a red traffic light and narrowly avoiding disaster, he managed to pull over to the side, miraculously unharmed. He called for a cab right away and hurried to the hospital, only to find that his wife was not listed as a patient there. Concerned and bewildered, Robert took his car to a repair shop for inspection. The technician revealed that the brake hoses had been cut deliberately. Astounded and speechless by this revelation, it became clear that someone intended to endanger his life with meticulous planning. Piecing together all these details, Robert headed straight to the police station. He informed law enforcement officials about someone's attempt on his life and indicated he had a strong suspicion about who might be responsible. Robert and Brenda Andrew were often regarded as an inseparable couple during their 17 years of marriage. Together they shared 2 beautiful children and seemed united in their family life. The couple was deeply religious, so they raised their children with strong faith and morals. Together, they attended church and actively engaged in charitable activities. To the average observer, their union appeared happy and stable. However, in October 2001, their family faced turmoil. Mrs. Andrew decided to leave her husband and filed for divorce. Brenda Evers was born on December 16, 1963, in Enid, Oklahoma. Her parents were devout Christians who valued family meals, group prayers, and regular church attendance. Brenda grew up as a quiet and peaceful child who excelled in school and spent significant time helping others at church. While many of her peers were dating during their teenage years, Brenda waited for her one true love. In high school, Brenda was a cheerleader for the soccer team and had a fondness for dancing, although she never participated in parties. In general, Brenda's younger years were marked by piety and modesty, reminiscent of her mother. She aspired to emulate her mother entirely and intended to be a housewife devoted to her husband and children after marriage. At the age of 17, Brenda met Rob Andrew through his sister. She was friends with Rob's sister at the time. Rob was older and studying at one of the state universities. They began to communicate more frequently and discovered that they shared many common interests, despite Rob being a Baptist, while Brenda was a Lutheran. Both held conservative views on life, regularly attended church, and dreamed of starting a large and loving family together. Their friendship gradually evolved into a romantic relationship. After some time, Brenda entered college in Winfield, Kansas. Despite being 125 miles apart, the couple maintained an active relationship through consistent communication. Eventually, Brenda transferred to a university in Ohio to be closer to Rob. During the summer of 1984, they got married. Not long after that, Robert received an appealing job offer in Houston, Texas. Although initially hesitant about the decision, he was persuaded by Brenda to take up the opportunity while he built his career as an advertising manager there. She managed to earn a degree and secure a job in banking. Mrs. Andrew fell in love with the city's tall buildings, nightclubs, and the hustle and bustle of life in Texas. This environment changed the young woman. She shed her excessive modesty, began taking care of herself, wore fashionable clothes, and embraced makeup. Her social circle expanded significantly. However, her husband was not pleased with these changes. He believed a woman of faith should be more reserved. Additionally, Rob was homesick. So, when he got an offer to return to an advertising agency in Oklahoma City, he was thrilled and accepted it eagerly. Brenda did not share his enthusiasm, which led to quarrels between them. They eventually reached a compromise. Robert would move first to find a suitable house, and if things went well, Brenda would join him later. For a few months, they lived apart. Eventually, the family reunited in the early 1990s in a luxurious house in Lansbrook's prestigious neighborhood. 9 months later, they welcomed their daughter, Tri-City. Brenda decided to quit her job to become a housewife and focus on raising their child. 4 years later, their son Parker was born. The family seemed to have it all: love, children, home, and financial stability. But then something tragic occurred on November 20th, 2001, just days before Thanksgiving. Rob had planned to visit Brenda's house to pick up the children for the holidays. Arrangements were made in advance, as the couple had divorced by then. That evening, Brenda met him at the doorstep and requested that he help with some faulty equipment in the garage. As Rob bent down to inspect it, he heard footsteps behind him and turned towards the noise. A gunshot suddenly rang out, and he fell wounded onto the concrete floor. Around 6 p.m., emergency services received a call from Brenda Andrew reporting this incident. She reported that she was injured and her husband was dead. An ambulance immediately rushed to the scene. When the paramedics, they found a horrific scene in the garage. In a pool of blood lay a man whose cause of death was a gunshot wound. Brenda's clothes were stained with blood, and herself looked remarkably detached. The paramedic attributed her condition to shock. "I tried to give Rob first aid, but I think he's dead," she reported. The victim's hand was bandaged, and she was later taken to the hospital. As the ambulance left the scene, police began their examination. The first thing they found was a .22 caliber bullet lodged in the wall. A little while later, a shotgun shell casing was found, so multiple weapons were used in the attack. The second thing officers noticed was the victim's wallet. He still had it on him, so the shooting wasn't connected to robbery. To understand what happened, it was necessary to interview Mr. Andrews' ex-wife. Brenda explained the reason for their meeting and said that while they were busy, 2 masked armed men entered the garage. The thugs shouted something in their direction, but what exactly she couldn't hear. One of them then shot Rob twice. The other wounded her as she tried to flee. After that, the attackers hurriedly fled. Who these attackers were or what they wanted wasn't known to her. She added that Robert could hardly have enemies since he was a decent and kind person, always helping others. The woman admitted that she was frightened by what had happened, especially considering there were children in the house at that time. However, many things she said were contradictory. It became clear to police that Brenda wasn't telling the truth, particularly concerning how unprepared she mentioned the children. Interviews with neighbors yielded no positive results. none had noticed anything strange that fateful evening. Hoping to find out more details about Brenda and Robert's personal life, detectives decided to question acquaintances of the couple about any midlife crisis they might have been going through. After the birth of their second child, the relationship between the couple became strained. Mr. Andrew repeatedly told friends and the pastor that Brenda was abusive to him and often said she hated their marriage. Ronnie Saint, a friend of Robert who frequently visited the bereaved family, mentioned he found their feelings unusual. Brenda wasn't shy about her expressions even around strangers. Rob clearly loved her more than she deserved, as he forgave her antics for quite a long time. Friends of the family unanimously claimed that Brenda had undergone a significant change. She went from being an ordinary housewife to someone of questionable behavior. These accusations were not unfounded. There was plenty of evidence to back them up. Brenda seemed to be going through a midlife crisis. Her style of dressing changed. She went from sophisticated attire to vulgar and brightly painted outfits. But it didn't stop there. Mrs. Andrew became very secretive with her husband, not telling him where or with whom she spent time or what she was doing. Soon, Robert became aware of his wife's affairs. In October 1997, Brenda began a relationship with Rick Nunley, who was her co-worker at an Oklahoma bank and also her friend's husband. They dated for a year and then had occasional phone contact afterward. Later on, James Higgins, a local store owner. At first, he was only attracted by Brenda's bold outfits and flirting. Eventually, after receiving hotel keys from Brenda, he succumbed to her skilled seduction and met with her once or twice a week. This affair lasted about 5 years without Rob realizing it. Over this period, Robert noticed that their marriage was deteriorating rapidly. His wife practically stopped communicating with him and spent less time at home. Despite everything, he hoped things would eventually improve and tried his best to keep the family together. In 2001, Brenda ended her relationship with Higgins, but not out of respect for her husband or their marriage vows. She was slipping deeper and deeper into a vice. Just 2 years earlier, a Baptist church had sprung up in Oklahoma City, largely due to Mr. Andrews' contributions. The man became a deacon, and his wife took on the role of Sunday school teacher. From the outside, their family appeared prosperous, adhering to morals and traditions. At that time, Brenda had not completely lost the image of a model wife. She happily taught the children the basics of religion and fellowship there. It was during this period that she met James Pavitt, a new lover. He was also a part-time school teacher, married and generally religious. He was friends with Rob as well. However, he couldn't resist Brenda's charms and dazzling smile. In the spring of 2001, they began meeting secretly at first. But eventually, losing all sense of prudence, they stopped hiding their feelings. Everyone in the church saw their affection for each other. Rob suspected his wife of infidelity and confronted her with a big argument. They separated around this time as James had divorced his wife. Rob still harbored hopes of restoring their family, but Brenda was resolute in her decision and even filed for divorce. Shortly after this event, there was an odd call to Mr. Andrews' office, followed by a shocking car malfunction that suggested an attempt on his life. Rob suspected the sweet couple and reported it to the police. In addition to teaching at school, James Pavitt also worked as an insurance agent. In the summer of that year, he took out an $800,000 insurance policy on Mr. Andrew, with Brenda as the sole beneficiary. Officers delved into investigating the bizarre attack on Mr. Andrews' family and also looked into the relationship between Brenda and James. They discovered incidents involving tampering with car brakes as well. Detectives pieced together these events carefully. Brenda's involvement in plotting her husband's death became more apparent with every uncovered fact. In addition, a new suspect emerged in the case, her newfound lover. Investigators then discovered that 2 weeks before the garage incident, Rob Andrew visited the insurance company. He aimed to exclude his unfaithful wife from his insurance policy. However, James refused to do so, stating that only the beneficiary herself, Brenda Andrew, could alter the contract. Not trusting his former friend's word, Rob sought verification from the management. It turned out that Brenda and James had attempted to forge the insurance policy by transferring ownership to Mrs. Andrew. Rob's signature was falsified, and it was dated retroactively. Mr. Andrew was assured by Pavitt's superiors that he still owned the policy and only the policyholder could change its terms. James became very angry upon learning of this incident, as it led to his dismissal. Investigation officers also discovered that Robert possessed a 16-gauge shotgun when he moved out of his house. Brenda did not give him back this weapon. During a search of Andrew's home, the shotgun was strangely absent. Meanwhile, an inspection at a neighbor's house yielded an unexpected result. A fired shell casing from the sought-after shotgun was found on their bedroom floor, and several .22 caliber bullets were discovered in their attic. At the time of the crime, the couple wasn't home, and no signs of forced entry were noted. Mrs. Gigstad admitted that Brenda Andrew had access to their spare key. Another significant piece of evidence came from Joanna Larson, Pavitt's daughter. On the day of the crime, she lent her father her car for repairs. However, when James returned it, Joanna noticed it wasn't fixed and discovered a .22 caliber bullet inside the vehicle. She further admitted that her father instructed her to dispose of it. When she informed him about it, investigators discovered that James had purchased a handgun the week before the attack. Consequently, detectives planned to question the sweet couple. On November 23rd, Robert Andrews' funeral took place. This crime raised many questions among family and friends. However, even more puzzling was that Brenda and her children did not appear at the ceremony. James Pavitt was also absent to bid farewell to his friend. No one present knew where they were. This worried not only Robert's relatives, but also the police. It became obvious that the no-shows had gone on the run. By this point, suspects were identified as autopsy results came back. Brenda's description of the attack differed significantly from the forensic report. As police suspected, two different weapons were used in the attack. Robert and Brenda were wounded differently than Brenda described. The first shot at Robert was indeed fired from a shotgun at long range, but the second came at close range from a .22 caliber pistol. Brenda's arm itself was also shot at close range with the same gun. By analyzing bloodstains found and their locations on fabric, it became clear that Brenda was near her husband when he was shot. The angle of the blood matched where the shooter stood. That is, it indicated Brenda had fired the second shot at wounded Robert. After receiving these examination results, Brenda and James were officially recognized as suspects and declared wanted fugitives. Unfortunately, they were days ahead of authorities already alerting border officials that suspects might have crossed into another country. However, clearly having fled abroad, likely Mexico, the decision was made to block their accounts to cut off means of survival, hoping they'd eventually surface trying to access money. And so they did. 3 months later, when Pavitt tried contacting his daughter, he requested her to transfer the money. However, there was one crucial thing the man hadn't considered. The girl was cooperating with the investigation. Joanna had no doubts about her father's involvement in the crime. She suspected he was concealing something from her, even on that occasion when he asked her boyfriend to call Mr. Andrew, pretending to be a doctor at the local hospital and reporting on his wife's illness. Thanks to James's call, the investigation learned that the suspects were hiding in Cancun, Mexico. In February 2002, James Pavitt and Brenda Andrew were apprehended at the border and handed over to U.S. authorities. Both were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. The Andrew couple's children were placed in the care of their paternal grandparents following their arrest. None of the defendants agreed to cooperate with the investigation after being caught. They didn't admit guilt and only spoke with their lawyers present. The first trial involved James. The prosecution meticulously built their case. It was reported that Pat, in his past, had been an army sniper skilled in handling firearms. His scandalous affair and attempts to prevent Rob Andrew from removing Brenda as his beneficiary were also highlighted. The jury took into account his daughter's testimony and physical evidence found. The jury found James Pavitt guilty and sentenced him to death. Next came Brenda Andrews' trial. The prosecution highlighted Brenda's character and her multiple infidelities. Former lovers testified, describing her as lacking faith and integrity. When asked by the prosecutor why she killed her husband, details about Brenda's personality stood out even more sharply during her responses because it portrayed a different picture of who she truly was. She replied, insisting that God knows she is pure and innocent heart. "If you people of faith, set me free," she implored. The prosecutor, however, disagreed vehemently. He painted her as a lecherous woman who did not love her husband, cheated him, and then killed him for selfish reasons. To support his claims, he presented the contents of a suitcase she had taken to Mexico. Inside were lacy lingerie and a book titled 203 Ways to Drive a Man Crazy in Bed. "Would a grieving widow run away from her husband's funeral?" he asked pointedly. The defendant's legal team attempted to cast Brenda as another victim of the tragic events. Her defense attorney reminded the court that she was also injured during the attack. However, forensic experts contended that Brenda had shot herself in the arm. The defense countered by presenting a letter with what they claimed was the true confession from Pavitt's soul to the crimes committed. Yet, handwriting experts determined that the document was forged by Brenda Andrew herself, undermining her defense considerably. The most shocking revelation came from Pavitt's attorney. Should his ward die, Brenda would become the beneficiary of his insurance policy. It seemed likely that Brenda intended for Rob to meet a similar fate, or perhaps she believed her innocence could be proven and punishment would shift to her lover. After his death sentence, she would then collect the insurance money. The jury deliberated for about 6 hours before reaching a verdict. Brenda Andrew was found guilty of the charges and sentenced to death. Both convicts are currently on death row, awaiting execution. Though Brenda has repeatedly appealed the judgment without success, Pitt's execution is scheduled for July 2024, although it may be rescheduled again, as it has been multiple times before. No date has yet been set for Brenda's execution. She remains the only woman sentenced to capital punishment in Oklahoma. The criminal intent demonstrated by Brenda and James is horrifying in itself. However, what further complicates matters is their self-perception as God-fearing individuals teaching morality to children. People who preach values they themselves do not follow are often unscrupulous and ruthless. From such individuals, one cannot expect anything because they lack moral principles. As the world heralded 1993 with joy and resolutions, one man in London set an eerie New Year's resolution of his own. A resolution to become a notorious killer. His target? Unsuspecting men in the gay community. But who was Colin Ireland, and what drove him to declare such a harrowing resolution? Why did he choose to transform a symbol of new beginnings into a dark and twisted game of cat and mouse? Hi, my name is James. Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In today's deep dive, we peel back the layers of one of the UK's most calculated serial killers, a man who sought fame through the fear he instilled. We'll uncover the story of how he executed his plan with chilling precision and overshadowed a bustling city's celebratory spirit by a series of gruesome crimes. To understand the mind behind the moniker the Gay Slayer, we must delve into the past of Colin Ireland. Born in 1954 in Dartford, Kent, Ireland's early life was marked by turbulence, upheaval, and poverty. His childhood, spent in an unsettled home, was the first chapter in a life marked by discontent and detachment. Raised by a single mother, Ireland's formative years were a carousel of different men entering and leaving his life. This instability laid the groundwork for a personality that craved control, a trait that would later manifest in the most sinister ways. His parents were unmarried 17-year-olds. His father left soon after his birth, and Ireland didn't know his identity. Due to his mother's money problems, they had to move a number of times. In spite of all the hardships, Ireland had a close relationship with his mother and remembered her as affectionate and benevolent. Ireland said that as a child, he was a thin, lanky little runt, always getting the worst of it from schoolyard bullies. This made Ireland frequently miss school,
As a result, he didn't get a proper education and became sad and withdrawn, choosing his few friends among the most unthreatening kids. As a teenager, Ireland found himself entangled with the law. His crimes, though initially petty, hinted at a deeper struggle within, a struggle for identity and a desperate need to assert his significance in a world where he felt invisible. Constantly in trouble of his own making, Ireland was sent to borstals and prisons for theft, robbery, blackmail, and burglary. He ran away to London at 16 and hung out in an amusement arcade with a bad reputation, where young boys were targeted by pedophiles. Ireland was approached by some of them. Besides, one of his jobs was a bouncer on a gay club. That's where his understanding of gay subcultures came from. As Ireland himself described the 70s, I was entering what I call the lost period, common to those who suffer from psychopathy. In between custodial periods, a lot of the 70s were a blur. I spent my time detached and wondering. In 1982, Ireland married Virginia Zammit, who was confined to a wheelchair. His colleague witnessed a pleasant family life when he visited them. They divorced 5 years later after Ireland's adultery. In 1989, he married Janet Young. He was abusive and after 4 months left his wife abruptly when she was away for the weekend, stealing over £10,000 from her account and leaving her completely broke. He moved to Southend-on-Sea, Essex, roughly 60 kilometers east of London, and lived in a hostel there. Later, he moved to his own flat. There, in this flat, Ireland decided to become a serial killer as his New Year's resolution. Drifting through adulthood, Ireland's life was a patchwork of odd jobs and fleeting relationships. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, there was a growing fascination with infamy and a desire to etch his name into criminal history. Ireland immersed himself in the dark world of serial killers. He studied them, not with a sense of horror, but with an analytical eye. What made them tick? How did they elude capture? These were the questions that consumed him. He spent many hours reading about serial killers and learning about geographic profiling, hence deciding to commit his murders far away from his home. A killer usually commits crimes in a certain radius of about 7 miles from his home. That's why Ireland chose London for his crime scene. He also planned to have at least 5 victims, because he had read that a person needs to have such body count to qualify as a serial killer. The year 1993 witnessed a terrifying series of crimes that shook the core of London's LGBTQ+ community. Colin Ireland, a man whose unassuming demeanor masked a sinister agenda, embarked on a calculated campaign of terror, meticulously planning and executing a series of murders with chilling precision. Ireland's hunting ground was the vibrant gay scene of London. He frequented the Coleherne Club, a known gay bar, seeking out his potential victims. Here, amid the pulsing music and crowded dance floor, Ireland would select and study his targets, plotting their fates with cold detachment. Ireland sought men who liked the passive role and S&M, so he could easily restrain them as they believed it was a sexual game. Members of the pub would wear color-coded handkerchiefs to indicate their sexual proclivities. Ireland was posing as a dominant partner. His first victim, Peter Walker, was a 45-year-old choreographer. Ireland met Walker at the Coleherne, and what started as a night of perceived intimacy quickly turned into a nightmare. Walker's body was discovered in his apartment, revealing the horror of Ireland's actions. Bound, gagged, and suffocated by a plastic bag placed over his head, Walker's death was just the beginning of Ireland's gruesome spree. Ireland placed 2 teddy bears in a sexual position on Walker's body and burned some of his pubic hair so he could smell it. While searching the flat, he discovered that Walker was HIV positive. Enraged, Ireland stuffed a condom into Walker's mouth and another one into his nostril. Each crime scene told a story of meticulous planning and ruthless execution. He carried a murder kit, a rope, handcuffs, and a change of clothing. Ireland left little evidence behind, confounding the police and instilling a growing sense of fear within the community. He was methodical, ensuring each scene was thoroughly cleaned, removing any traces that could lead back to him. He also stayed in the flat till morning to avoid suspicion from leaving in the middle of the night. To describe the nights after his murders, Ireland said,
I think that affected me mentally to quite a degree, sitting with his body for 5 to 6 hours, watching him gradually get blotches, go cold. It wasn't something that I could cope with, to be honest. Ireland disposed of all the things he touched by throwing them out of a train window on his way back to Southend. When the police discovered the body, they assumed it was the result of a sexual game gone wrong. 2 months later, Ireland returned to the pub where he met 37-year-old librarian Christopher Dunn, who invited Ireland to his flat. Ireland tied, handcuffed, then beat and tortured his helpless victim before suffocating him by stuffing pieces of cloth into his mouth. After murdering him, Ireland used Dunn's PIN and bank card to withdraw $200 from his account. The police assumed it was an accident as a result of a sex game and didn't link his death to walkers. Ireland was getting more and more confident as his New Year's resolution was coming together. Ireland met 35-year-old businessman Perry Bradley III at the Coleherne pub. He was the son of Texas Democratic Party fundraiser Perry Bradley Jr. In his Kensington flat, Bradley refused to be tied, but Ireland told him that he couldn't perform sexually without it. Bradley reluctantly agreed, and then Ireland told him that he was a thief and he just wanted his money and PIN. After Bradley gave Ireland his PIN, Ireland told him that he should try to fall asleep, as he wouldn't leave his flat till morning. Bradley did fall asleep, and Ireland realized that Bradley could identify him and strangled him. Then he placed a doll on top of the dead man's body. The heinous crimes of Colin Ireland not only sent shockwaves through the communities he targeted, but also captured the relentless gaze of the media. The press dubbed him the Gay Slayer, a moniker that sensationalized his horrific acts and underscored the homophobic undercurrents of the time. Within 3 days, on June 7th, Ireland was back at the Coleherne. He met 33-year-old Andrew Collier, a housing warden, and went to his home. Again, Ireland handcuffed and tied his victim to the bed, demanding his bank details. After killing Collier's cat, Ireland strangled Collier. He placed a condom on Collier's penis and fastened the dead cat's mouth over it, and put the cat's tail into Collier's mouth. On June 15th, Ireland met Maltese chef Emanuele Spiteri. Aged 41, he cuffed, bound, and strangled his victim, then stayed in his flat watching TV and eating Spiteri's food. After cleaning the scene, Ireland set fire to the flat, but it only caused minor damage. As the body count rose, so did the alarm. The gay community, already marginalized, now found itself in the grip of a predator who walked among them, unseen, unknown, and deadly. But what was the motive behind these abhorrent acts? Was it a deep-seated animosity towards the gay community, or something more cold and calculated? And what were the critical mistakes Ireland made, and how did they lead to his capture? As the death toll rose, London's Metropolitan Police found themselves grappling with a cunning predator. The investigation into Colin Ireland's crimes was a race against time, a complex puzzle that demanded not just diligence, but innovation in the face of a killer who seemed always one step ahead. Initially, the investigation faced significant challenges. Ireland's careful planning and meticulous cleanup at each crime scene left frustratingly few clues. The killer's methodical approach in disguising his identity and movements compounded the difficulty, turning the investigation into a labyrinthine task. Detectives were confronted with a disturbing pattern. All victims were men from the gay community, their bodies discovered in their own homes, a sign of trust, brutally exploited. This realization led to a focused investigation in London's gay scene, particularly around the Coleherne pub where Ireland hunted for his victims. The breakthrough came from meticulous police work and a stroke of luck. A forgotten fingerprint at a crime scene, a chance capture on one of London's first CCTV cameras. These were the pivotal moments that began to unravel Ireland's web of deceit. When Ireland was in Andrew Collier's flat, they heard a noise outside and came up to the window. Ireland gripped a horizontal metal bar across the window and forgot to wipe it off. The police then found these fingerprints. And finally, Ireland was captured on CCTV. Some witnesses said Spiteri left Coleherne with a man.
Then police traced his route home. His train journey went through Charing Cross Station, fitted with one of London's first CCTV cameras. Each piece of evidence was a precious key, unlocking parts of a puzzle that Ireland thought he had so carefully hidden. But what was it that finally led to Ireland's downfall? How did the police connect the dots in a case that seemed to defy resolution? The relentless pursuit of justice in the Colin Ireland case turned a crucial corner with a single, seemingly innocuous phone call. Ireland, emboldened by his actions, made a call to the police, taunting them about his crimes. The day after Peter Walker's murder, having heard no news reports of his crime, he anonymously called the Samaritans and the Sun, telling them that he had murdered Walker and locked his dogs in another room. Later, the police received a call from Dunn's killer taunting them because they had failed to link his death to Walker's. In his next anonymous call to the police, he asked, "Are you still interested in the death of Peter Walker? Why have you stopped the investigation? Doesn't the death of a homosexual man mean anything? I will do another. I have always dreamed of doing the perfect murder." After Collier's death, Ireland called Kensington police and said that he had killed 4 men and they had to stop him. He told the police that he had read many books on serial killers and said, "If you don't stop me, it will be 1 a week." He told the police that he had studied the FBI manual, that is, Whoever Fights Monsters, by ex-FBI agent and serial killer specialist Robert Ressler. "I have got the book," he said. "I know how many you have to do." Ireland later said that the TV crime series The Bill had also given him many of his ideas and police evasion methods. Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks said, "Just because you read books about serial killers doesn't mean you have any interest in becoming a serial killer yourself. But if that is your motive, then actually reading books can give you an awareness of the ways in which serial killers have acted in the past." Armed with this new evidence, the police intensified their efforts. A suspect started to take shape from the shadows. It was a breakthrough moment in the investigation, a lead that they desperately needed. On 19th of July, 1993, Ireland went to his solicitor. He said that he was on the CCTV, but that he had not killed Spiteri. He went to his flat for sex, but there was another man. He didn't want a threesome and left. The investigation took a dramatic turn as law enforcement officers matched Ireland's fingerprint to the Collier crime scene. His arrest was a moment of triumph mixed with stark horror as the extent of his crimes came to light. Ireland's overconfidence combined with advanced police work and the critical clues helped bring the killer to justice. The capture of Colin Ireland was more than just the conclusion of a manhunt. It was a moment that brought some semblance of closure to the victims' families and a community shaken by fear. It also opened up vital conversations about the safety of marginalized groups. The trial of Colin Ireland was set to be a gripping chapter in British legal history, raising questions about the nature of evil and the psyche of a man who sought infamy through brutality. What revelations would his trial bring? A legal journey that would reveal the full extent of his chilling crimes was just beginning. The trial was a meticulous dissection of Ireland's actions, each day unraveling more about the man behind the murders. The prosecution presented a case built on a foundation of solid evidence. Ireland, facing overwhelming evidence, made a decision that stunned the courtroom. He confessed to his crimes, detailing them with a cold detachment that sent shivers down the spines of all present. His confession was not just an admission of guilt, but a hair-raising narrative of his calculated and brutal actions. Ironically, pleading guilty to all his murders and confessing, Ireland avoided the publicity he so deeply craved. The heart of the trial, however, lay in the stories of the victims. Their lives, tragically lost, remind us of the human cost of hate and prejudice. Were these 5 murders Ireland's only crimes? Or did he kill others? Serial killers often withhold some of their murders from the police to gain a sense of control over them, even in prison. In January 1993, soon after Ireland's resolution, the police found a dead gay man in his home in Soho. They believed this might have been done by Ireland. However, the gay slayer never claimed this crime. Along with his other victims, a perilous shadow loomed over Hollywood star Tom Cruise. In a chilling twist of fate, Cruise, then at the height of his career and married to Nicole Kidman, narrowly escaped a potentially fatal encounter. According to statements and police files that later surfaced, Ireland had spotted Cruise in a London bar in 1993. Driven by a perilous and misguided belief, Ireland falsely assumed Cruise to be gay and plotted to make him one of his victims. The killer's sinister plan was unexpectedly thwarted. Cruise, possibly sensing something amiss or merely coincidental in his timing, left the bar abruptly, eluding Ireland's grasp. Ireland's conviction was a foregone conclusion, but the sentencing phase was a crucial moment. The judge, in a powerful address, condemned Ireland's actions, emphasizing the gravity and premeditated nature of the crimes. The judge called Ireland exceptionally frightening and dangerous. He said to him, "To take one human life is an outrage. To take 5 is carnage. In my view, it is absolutely clear you should never be released." Ireland was sentenced to 5 counts of life imprisonment for the murders. But the story does not end with Ireland's conviction. There are unconfirmed rumors that Ireland strangled his cellmate, a convicted child killer, in Wakefield Prison, Yorkshire. After that, he was transferred to maximum security lodgings at Whitemoor Prison, Cambridgeshire, into a private cell of his own. His pattern of selecting victims, meticulous planning, and the psychological games played with law enforcement are now studied in criminal psychology courses worldwide. Moreover, the investigation into Ireland's crimes highlighted the importance of community involvement in criminal cases. The breakthroughs in this case were a result of not just police work, but also the cooperation of the community, which had been terrorized by his actions. Ireland's case became a catalyst for discussions about homophobia and hate crimes. It highlighted the urgent need for societal change, not just in policy, but in everyday attitudes and understanding. Ireland died on 21 February 2012 of pulmonary fibrosis and a fractured hip he had suffered earlier. Former prison governor Vanessa, who had crossed paths with numerous hardened criminals, called Ireland the most frightening prisoner she has ever come across. She said, "I don't know what it was about him. He just emanated evil." He was proud of what he did, same as many other serial killers. What drives a man to commit such calculated and brutal acts of violence? To understand Ireland's psyche, we delve into the complex labyrinth of his mind, piecing together a profile that is as disturbing as it is intriguing. Experts who have studied Ireland's case point to a combination of factors. His troubled childhood, marked by instability and lack of a father figure, may have sown the seeds of his later behavior. But it was his deep-seated desire for recognition, a craving to leave a mark on the world, that propelled him into the abyss of serial killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes suggests a high level of intelligence and planning. He studied serial killers, not with repulsion, but with a scholar's interest. He learned from their mistakes, aiming not just to evade capture, but to master the art of killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes offers a chilling glimpse into the mindset of a serial killer. His need for control and recognition, coupled with his ability to blend into society, challenges our understanding of criminal behavior. Forensic psychologists theorize that Ireland's choice of victims from the gay community was strategic rather than personal. He saw them as easy targets, vulnerable due to societal marginalization. This choice reflects not just a cold-blooded strategy, but a chilling indifference to human life. He said about how he chose his victims, "I think it's been something that's been triggered in me some time before. I felt if I was approached, it was likely that I would kill. I thought to myself, if I wasn't approached, something wouldn't have happened. I would have gone on my way and nothing would have happened." Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks explained, "What he does is he reduces the chance of choosing an inappropriate victim or somebody who wasn't going to respond by not selecting those who didn't approach him." Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Ireland's psychology is his lack of remorse. His confessions were devoid of emotion, his recounting of the crimes clinical. This detachment points to a possible psychopathic personality, where empathy and conscience are alarmingly absent. Detective Inspector Martin Finnegan said, He was very factual about his acts, as if he was describing someone else's activities. Absolutely no compassion at all. I didn't detect much hatred. It was just matter of fact, like, I went down the shops and bought this, went into the flat and killed him. In most cases, the murderers who kill gay people are gay themselves, and those blatantly homophobic are often secretly gay. Was it really a plausible excuse for Ireland to give in to his secret emotions? Ireland compared the buzz of his first kill to that of losing his virginity. Maybe these hidden feelings brought this simile to his mind. Was Ireland just dishonest with himself and others, trying to hide what he really couldn't control? Ireland said he was heterosexual and didn't touch or have sex with the men he killed. However, it's difficult to imagine that at least 5 people invited him to his flat for sex, undressed, and let Ireland tie them without even a single kiss. Can a person even decide to become a serial killer as a career just for the sake of it, without any ulterior motives, and choose the specifics of his crimes by pure logic? Or is it something deeper? Or was theft the real reason of Ireland's crimes, and murdering his victims was a calculated move to prevent them from identifying him later? There's inconsistency in Ireland's story about the murder of Perry Bradley. He said that he had promised Bradley to leave him alive, but then it occurred to him that Bradley could identify him. This narrative strongly contradicts with his whole intention of choosing his victims for murder to gain fame from becoming a serial killer. Was Ireland just exploiting homophobic moods in the society to mask the mercenary nature of his crimes, hoping that it will win him sympathy of the public and reduce the term of his imprisonment? Or was there more than one reason, perhaps all of them combined? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Share your perspectives and let me know what other cases you'd like me to explore. Until next time. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vanessa Marcotte. Vanessa Theresa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts, where she developed a strong academic foundation. She went on to graduate summa laude from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. Following her graduation, she secured a job at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston. Later, she advanced her career by becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Whenever possible, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000, located in another state. As an only child, her mother Rosanna cherished these opportunities and looked forward to spending time with her daughter, who made it a point to visit every 2 months or so. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, at 1 p.m., Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road to go for a run and then take the commuter bus back to New York. She chose a familiar area for her run. When she failed to return after several hours, her mother contacted the police. The officers immediately started searching the area where Vanessa was supposed to have lost. Her mother, Rosanna, became concerned about Vanessa's unusual and prolonged absence, so she asked the police for help. This case gained significant national media attention because it was rare in Princeton, where no similar incident had occurred in the past 30 years. Furthermore, just a few days earlier, a similar incident involving 30-year-old Karina Vitrano, a runner and fitness blogger, had happened in a New York City neighborhood. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog traced a scent and led the search team to a densely vegetated area, about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Vanessa's mother's home. There, they found the body of a woman, quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination of the body revealed that her death was a criminal act. She had been stripped of her clothes, and there were burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The body was discovered in a secluded area, surrounded only by woods and a road, with no houses nearby. Notably, Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, despite an extensive police search. It is believed that the perpetrator intentionally took these items to prevent leaving behind any DNA evidence. Next to the body, a sneaker with burn marks was found on the grass, and similar burn marks were discovered at other locations. Detectives deduced that the perpetrator used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA traces.
A forensic examination revealed that Vanessa died from strangulation, and her fierce struggle for life led to the discovery of unknown DNA under her fingernails. The discovery that Vanessa's clothes had been removed clarified the motive behind the crime. Medical examiners detected signs of male involvement and analyzed DNA samples, but the results yielded no matches in either local or national databases. Authorities urged residents of Princeton and neighboring areas to remain vigilant and cautious, encouraging anyone with information or suspicions to contact the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. announced at a press conference on August 11th that the perpetrator was likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle that resulted in Vanessa's death. The news of Vanessa's fate shocked not only her family and the people of Princeton, but also her colleagues. According to a Google spokesperson, Vanessa Marcotte was a highly valued member of the Google team at their New York office, where she had worked for the past year and a half. She was known for her constant smile, her dedication to volunteer work, and her love of Boston sports. Her Google colleagues were deeply shocked and saddened by her death, and their thoughts were with her family and friends. Her alma mater, Boston University, paid tribute to her, expressing their deepest condolences to her family and friends, and stating that they were in their thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. The question remains, who was responsible for Vanessa Marcotte's tragic death? Investigators believe that the person who took her life was either a local resident or a frequent visitor to Princeton, and was likely familiar with the area. Furthermore, detectives think that Vanessa did not know her killer and that their paths crossed by chance. While the investigation continued, law enforcement appealed to the public for assistance, setting up separate 24-hour phone lines for this purpose. A crucial eyewitness eventually came forward, reporting that they had seen Vanessa stop at a local convenience store to grab a drink of water after 1 p.m. on August 7th. At the time, she was seen walking and chatting on her cell phone. Based on this information, investigators believe that the attack on Vanessa likely occurred within the next 2 hours, between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. Notably, her phone was switched off at 2:11 p.m. and has remained inactive ever since. Police officers thoroughly searched the area where the body was found and the surrounding vicinity, following up on numerous leads, but their efforts were initially unsuccessful. 3 months later, the police received new information about the case. A new witness came forward, stating that on August 7th, they saw a dark-colored Ford SUV parked on the curb near where Vanessa's body was found, with its hood up on 2 separate occasions. The first time, the witness drove past the SUV at around 12:45 p.m. and noticed the driver, a Hispanic-looking man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second time, the witness drove past the same location at approximately 2:05 p.m., and the SUV was still parked in the same spot, but its hood was down, and there was no one visible inside or near the vehicle. Authorities launched a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and reportedly lives near Princeton. 6 months after Vanessa's death, on February 23, 2017, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. disclosed additional investigation details. The DNA found on Vanessa's body was sent to a lab, and a profile was created based on DNA evidence and witness testimony. The suspect is believed to be a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He likely owns or had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and had visible upper body injuries within days of the attack. About 3 weeks after Vanessa Marcotte's death, a police officer on patrol in Worcester County noticed a man who resembled the suspect. He was driving a vehicle that was identical to the one seen on the day of the incident. The officer rapidly jotted down the license plate number and, after tracing the car's ownership, the police team proceeded to the man's house. Angelo Colin Ortiz, a 31-year-old Puerto Rican native, had no prior criminal record. He was a married father of 3 who had lived in Worcester for less than a year, working as a third-party contractor for FedEx, making deliveries in the Princeton area. Despite his seemingly ordinary life, Ortiz had a disturbing side. According to his neighbors, he was known to make inappropriate, vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood, which led them to describe him as perverted. Additionally, a former Princeton postal worker alleged that Ortiz would often make crude, sexually explicit comments in Spanish about her and other women to his co-worker. When questioned by the police about Vanessa Marcotte, Ortiz claimed he didn't know her and couldn't remember being in Princeton on the day of the attack. Despite this, he agreed to provide a DNA sample, which subsequently matched the DNA found under Vanessa's fingernails. Ortiz was arrested and charged 3 days later. Prosecutors alleged that on the day of the crime, Ortiz purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store 6 miles from the scene at 2:35 p.m., implying that Vanessa was likely already dead by then, and Ortiz had returned to try to destroy evidence. Ortiz's lawyers claimed that Ortiz did not fully grasp his rights because of a language barrier, and Ortiz himself said he was not aware that he had the right to refuse to provide a DNA sample. Following a long trial, the judge rejected the defense's request to exclude the DNA evidence from the case. Ortiz pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder and robbery. The Marcotte family accepted the plea deal to avoid a difficult and emotional trial. In October 2022, Angelo Colin Ortiz received a life sentence with a minimum term of 45 years before he becomes eligible for parole.